Today on Countdown to Green, presented by Traction. We find out who respected the bumps at Sebring. The Michelin wildcard entries are revealed. And the team manager for Scuderia Ferrari Esports stops in for a chat. All that and more coming up on Countdown to Green.
It may be the start of a brand new year, but it is time for a season finale. Hello and welcome back to the final round of the IMSA Esports Global Championship. My name is John Monroe and alongside me is Lewis McGlade. This is the Traction Countdown to Green. Traction is the place to go if you want to find out all about sim racing, whether it's news, reviews, guides, everything like that. But today, the attention, Lewis, is on the Michelin 240 at Daytona.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, look, it's going to be great to end the season. Obviously, it was only last week that we had the penultimate round of the season at Sebring. A lot of fun out there, but yeah, it feels right to end it at Daytona.
A very quick fire end to the year as well. Obviously, 2 races in consecutive weekends. Coming up in today's show, though, we are going to be recapping that previous race last weekend at Sebring. We're also going to be taking a look at some of the interesting Michelin wildcard entries we've got for this event today. And of course, we're going to be giving our predictions, our preview for today's race at Daytona and who we think is going to take home the crown. So Lewis, last time out at Sebring, something that's happened quite a few times this year has to be said. We started things off with a bit of drama and a bit of controversy.
Yeah, it was pretty much straight from the start. Obviously, it was fantastic crowd strike on pole position again. Didn't last that long, realistically. There was an issue with a start infringement. They got a stop-and-go penalty. That was dealt with a little bit later on, though, because as we came through turn 2, or towards turn 2 and turn 3, Elvis Rankin had a bit of a spin. I think there was a bit of an issue, regen, rear tyres, brakes, and the car went for a spin, which we did catch on broadcast, and then that was terrifying. He then spun immediately afterwards. I feel so bad. It's when your tyres are overheated for spinning, yeah, it was so easy to spin again, and that caught BS competition, and that's the big talking point, is that one of our main title contenders were caught up very early.
Well, they were second going into this round, and for the 89 to be wiped out at such an early stage, it kind of put a dampener on it, because you're thinking, well, at this point, the number 5's got a big championship lead, they're going to run away with it. Thankfully, though, we have lots and lots of strong competition in there, and obviously the likes of Redline with the 20 and Lullum, they were very much staying in the mix, although there was a lot of competition for that position in the race.
Yeah, I mean, for realistically, Williams, they started to really take control once the crowd strike had come into the pit lane, especially towards the end of the stints. And even towards the end of the race, the Redline car was under a fair amount of pressure from Solbeck, who a proper standout drive. Max Muir and Agustin Canapino, who's been in sim racing for a long time. I know there's real and most obviously he's done IndyCar and such. A quality driver. Great to see him on the grid. And that team was rapid this round.
I think Solbeck were probably the surprise for me, but it shouldn't be that surprising because they've been right up there consistency-wise all season, and they have had good pace. They've just not been quite as high as they were in terms of I guess making an appearance right at the front for the broadcast as part of the battle, but definitely taking it to Redline. I feel like the Redline car was really hanging on for that P2. They had nothing for the number 5 Williams car. I mean, Jaden Munoz, that opening stint, spectacular stuff, built up such a big gap. It was amazing to watch. Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible opening stint, and Matt Farah then just had to bring it home. But in doing so, Matt Farah has become the driver to win the most races in the GTP era, because he's won 3 races, 2 with Jaden Munoz, and then 1 last season, of course, with Josh Ladd. We'll see how Daytona goes, but it's looking good for them. And then obviously we also had GTD as well. I'm going to start with more bad luck for Redline and the 170 car, because yet again, they were caught up in an early incident that didn't seem to be much of their fault. Bad
luck is one thing, but the fact that they're constantly in it tells you there's something a little bit more than just bad luck. Sure, it might not always be their fault, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be their fault. But there is a position, there's a wrong place, wrong time. How aggressive are you going on those opening laps? And it's just caught them.
If they had qualified better as well, maybe they wouldn't have been in amongst the chaos. And obviously, it's a tale of two halves for Redline, because they've got the 170 having problems. The 171 has been doing amazingly. It won every race of the season up until Sebring. But then we saw AO racing with Kwanda, Rexy on pole position again. This time, though, they were able to convert.
Great to see that car winning. Excellent drive, dominant all the way throughout. Felt a little bit of pressure late on. Redline were not done with things. It was kind of dipping under 2 seconds with the final 10 minutes of the race, which was quite exciting. Of course, and it was the battle between those two. The Williams Mercedes was way too far back, so it was just between those two. Great fight. But once again, iRacing by Coranda, this time they come through, they do take the victory. They close down that championship lead a little bit. It's still big and it's still in favour of Red Line, but things can change quickly at Daytona.
I have to give a shout out as well to Alejandro Sanchez for Apex Racing, because to go from, I think it was 19th on the grid up to 4th in that first stint, they ended up finishing P5, but in a field that's so tightly matched and so close on pace, I thought that was like a spectacular standout stint for me. Yeah,
I remember when Apex took on Alejandro Sanchez, this was a couple of years ago now, a year and a bit ago, might have been longer than that. Time flies in sim racing, I don't really remember, but I remember thinking, I was like, that is a great signing. And he's proven that with the team so many times. So he's had a couple of pole positions and such in this championship before. He is a rapid driver, but it's not just about using the speed. Like, fair enough, that's one thing, but to be able to carve your way through the grid, especially around Sebring, which, we've both had our little experiences around it. It's not an easy track to make moves at.
Definitely not. There's not many key overtaking spots. You have to really pick your moment, and traffic's a big thing. Yeah. We saw an amazing move from Maxime Briant as well in the GTP car around the outside, and it almost caused a big crash in the first 20 minutes, but you really have to pick your moments, as you say, at Sebring to get it right. And we saw a very exciting race from it. I would say, however, there's probably going to be more overtaking opportunities today at Daytona. Now, this track is very different to Sebring in terms of its characteristics, but it produces some fantastic racing through the years. Yeah,
definitely. Traffic management in that middle sector is going to be quite tricky as you go through this, particularly through the West Horseshoe, then out back into NASCAR 1 and 2. Obviously, we've got the Le Mans chicane. You can call it the bus stop chicane, it's fine, I'll allow it, but it is the Le Mans chicane now, apparently. That's great. Down as a turn 1, super awkward. So traffic's going to be a bit awkward, as it always kind of is around here. But like you say, big overtaking opportunities, big slipstream, especially in that GTD category. I think I'm going to see some drag races to the line.
So a great layout for racing for today's event. But if you're wondering what that layout actually looks like, here is an onboard lap of the circuit.
So, the road course here at the Daytona International Speedway, the world centre of racing, the amphitheatre for today's title showdown. You want to stick to the right-hand side of the road and start turning the car before you hit the brake pedal into turn 1. It's a long braking zone, trail braking all the way through, getting as close to the grass as possible on the inside, and then a flat-out run through the turn 2 chicane. Stick over to the left-hand side as you brake for International Horseshoe. This is a wide corner, lots of room to work with, low speed, lots of room on the exit as well, as you can see, running all the way across the white line over towards the curb on the left. Then it's a flat-out run through the dog leg, once again sticking to the left-hand side of the circuit on exit so that you can prepare for braking into West Horseshoe. Again, lots of room to work with. A big curb on the inside, it's a long, slow corner, and it's all about getting the traction as you power through towards the exit of the corner. This is the transition, turn 6 and 7, back onto the banking. Obviously important to get a good exit here to carry your speed. It's also a deceptive corner, it's tricky, it's easy to lose the back end. Obviously the downforce levels are lower than you might expect in a GTP like this with the slow corner speed. But from this point on, it's a flat-out run across the banking. You're looking for potential overtaking moves on traffic into the Le Mans chicane. You're looking for a slipstream. Speaking of the Le Mans chicane, this is a crazy corner. 200 miles per hour on entry, braking just after the one board, over the curbs on the entry, over the curbs on the exit. Minimum corner speed here of 135 miles per hour. This really does separate the great from the greatest. And then it's a flat-out run to the finish. Time to breathe, time to reassess. Maybe look for a move as you head towards turn 1. Shorten the line as much as you can. And that is going to end the lap here at the Daytona International Road Course.
So Lewis, Daytona, obviously a track we're going to see a lot of. We've got the Roar Before the 24 this weekend. We've obviously got today's race here in the IMSA Esports Global Championship, and we have the Daytona 24-hour on iRacing, then the real-life Daytona 24-hour. There's a lot of racing at Daytona, so you better hope you like the circuit.
This is the whole thing with it feels fitting that Daytona ends the season, because obviously we start the season at Road Atlanta, the real season ends at Road Atlanta, and then we end our season where the real season starts. There's kind of like that symmetry, that poetry that works. I really like that. And I really like that we end the season before the real season starts, so we get to kind of have that like little bit of, kind of to get us into the mood of Daytona.
You obviously watched the race last year. It's become a staple item on the calendar. Any key thoughts from that? Anything you notice in particular?
Well, I mean, there is the obvious ones of it being the last race of the season. A lot of teams and drivers will be out there to prove themselves more so than even on a normal round, especially if you've had a bad season. Take the 170 Team Redline car that's had a bad season. So this round is win it or bin it. Right, and that's kind of the same for anyone that's kind of lower down in the top 10. Let's just go for it and push even harder than we've ever pushed. And you can kind of do that at Daytona because the slipstream is so big around here that you can use that either to work your way through the order, which is great, or you can use it to hold position and save an absolute load of fuel.
It's one of these tracks, isn't it, where you don't necessarily want to be at the front of a given train at any given moment, right? Yeah. There's a lot more tactics at play.
Cars that will sit in fifth, and normally on a round they would work their way through. They'd want to be right, let's get through second, third, let's get our way to the order. Here they want to be fourth or fifth, because that's where you can save the fuel. And if you can reduce as much pit time around here as possible, that's really important, because the pit lane around here is now so long. Now that the pit limiter extends all the way around the inside of turn 1 to the exit, which I think is too far, but I get it. That's super awkward. And then I don't want to be making an extra trip down pit lane, because the pit lane entry here, I say this every year, the pit lane entry is so wide. I actually think it's way harder than, say, for example, at Spa, where it's narrow. Yeah, sure, there's water in, but you've got so much reference as to what's going on.
100%.
You've got no reference here. It's just kind of like...
Where are going to be the points in the circuit that our championship leaders are going to have to be most cautious?
I'll roll back to last season very quickly, because Team Redline, Apex Racing Team, they were battling for the championship in GTD. And they were very close. They both finished first and second in the opening 3 races, like split between them. So I think it was Apex who had the lead going into it. And then they had an issue in pit lane. They were perfect out on track. They had one issue in pit lane, and it cost them the championship. It wasn't their fault. It just happened. And Team Redline won. So you kind of got to be cautious everywhere, and you've got to be ready everywhere. But most notably, be careful in traffic. There is no point in throwing away the last couple of months' worth of work by being that little bit too hasty, trying to force your way down the inside into the Le Mans chicane, which happens so many times. It will probably happen once or twice in this race. Let's hope it's not one of our championship contenders.
Another interesting thing, of course, has to be the Michelin wildcard entry this time out. Now, this is something we've seen a couple of times so far this season. We've seen one entry in the opening 2 rounds. We didn't see one at Sebring last time out, but we have 2 entries this time, Lewis. One in GTP, one in GTD, and both of them are very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's great to have 2 for the final round of the season. The first one in that GTD category, the Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team. Great to see them. Big name, obviously, in the world of sim racing. Big name in the world of motorsport as well. Officially manufacturer-backed team. So good to have them in the championship. And then in the GTP category, it is the Verstappen.com team.
Absolutely. We've got Gustavo Ariel driving that car alongside Max Verstappen himself. And that is a very strong lineup. Obviously, Gustavo's been doing a lot of esports recently at a very high level. He's got a very high iRacing. We know what he's capable of. Max Verstappen needs no introduction. I
mean, honestly, he's obviously good in motorsport. We see that in Formula 1. But in sim racing, Max is very, very fast. Gustavo Ariel, great team between the pair of them. Ariel's done a lot of endurance racing here on iRacing. He's 11k I-rated. And then Max is in the 10s, 11s as well. And they're racing in the Acura, which obviously has had the last 2 pole positions in the category as well. So that's good. And it's quite interesting because Max has tested that Acura in the real world. He tested it in just before the Vegas Grand Prix last year.
So Verstappen.com, Ferrari, what a fantastic way to end the season in terms of our Michelin wildcard entries. Speaking of Ferrari, Lewis has actually been catching up with one of their team members.
So I'm joined by Tiziana from Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports, of course, the team manager of the team. Now, tell us a little bit about the team, a little bit about the behind the scenes, and what is it that you do?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm the Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team manager, as you said. In Ferrari Sports has 2 different souls. One is the team, one is the series. Is one of our newest extension, and of course it's a Ferrari DNA to participate in motorsport competition. It's also one of the preferred channels to engage and speak with young people, millennials and Gen Z. And that's the reason why in the last years we decided to increase our commitment and officially participate not only in Formula One, because when we started we were only in Formula One, but also starting especially from this year in some iRacing events and IMSA Esports.
Now, coming into this, of course, you're the wildcard for the GTD category. Got a couple of quality drivers, including Ollie Steinbrenner, of course, is the defending champion, effectively, in the GTD category. So, great lineups there. How's practice been going for the team? Are you looking strong coming into Daytona?
Yeah. Ole and Lorenzo, they started to be with us from the beginning of this year. And they've done a lot of sessions already leading to the race, and they put a lot of efforts and hours to prepare the race. They've been every day joining the team, and despite, the challenge, because they started to be with us only a few weeks ago, but they did already, and they are still doing an amazing job and showing especially the work ethic. So I'm pretty confident. They have experience with the car, with the Ferrari 296 GT3. So let's see, finger crossed for Sunday.
Well, the Ferrari's been looking pretty strong in that GT3 category, so we'll keep our fingers crossed for you. But of course, jumping in now into the season finale of the third series here in the IMSA Esports Global Championship. What are your thoughts of the championship so far? Because, of course, we've had 12 or 11 races before. This is the 12th race that we've had. A great addition to being yourselves. So what are your thoughts of the series?
I think that it's really great that IMSA, they're putting their trust and effort to organize also the sports series. It's, of course, a top-tier competition within iRacing. And this weekend, as I said, we will try to do our best, especially to be competitive. But it's one of our target. It's next year to be from the beginning, to participate in the season, and not only to be like a guest, like this year that we are wildcard.
Well, Tiziana, thank you so much. Good luck for the race, and maybe we'll chat to you in the near future.
Thank you very much. Thank you, of course.
It's going to be really exciting to see how both of our wildcard entries get on today, but there is, of course, a bigger picture at stake. There's a championship to be decided here at Daytona today. GTP first, Lewis. Obviously, it's looking good right now for the Williams number 5 car. Do you think they're going to do it? Yeah,
it seems to be a safe bet at the moment, let's be honest. They've been really, really consistent. Qualified second in all 3 of the races so far, which is a wild stat. They're leading the championship comfortably. They've won 2 races. Matt Farrow is the driver who's now won the most in the GTP era, having 3 victories to his name. They are hard to look past. However, the thing is something always goes wrong at Daytona. And I'm not saying that something will definitely go wrong for them, but for someone in contention for the championship, whether it's in GTP or GTD, I don't know, something's going to go wrong. That said, knock on wood, I'll go with it.
But I'm going to be intrigued to see if the number 5 goes out and tries to stay out of trouble by being fast and winning the race and sticking it right at the front and holding it there, or they play it a little bit more conservatively and maybe settle for points. To be honest, I think it might be more dangerous settling for points. Yeah. So I'm very, very intrigued to see how they go about it. Obviously, I would love to see finally the number 4 CrowdStrike Acura getting a good result, because they've had a couple of pole positions recently. They just haven't been able to convert.
Yeah, nothing to show for it basically, and that's the drama of sim racing and motorsport. That sometimes you might have the pace, you might have the ability to go after it, but then for one thing or another, I mean, Sebring was just a slight technical infringement basically on the race start, and they broke that procedure, and then they got slapped with a big penalty. If that happens here, they'll be very cross. Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Another team I feel like we have to mention is, of course, Solpec. They've been the strongest Porsche this year. They've been super consistent, but they've not managed to get a victory. What do you think their chances are here?
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you look at Casey Cohen and Owen Carroll last year, when they had their breakthrough victory around the circuit, this is the place where you can get a breakthrough circuit. I wouldn't necessarily say it leans more towards the Porsche 963, but we'll have to wait and see. I will say, to just give them a big shout out, they have been fantastic, just from consistency this season, because we haven't really spoken about them at all really on the pre-show, and yet they've always kind of been there in the top 5 and such, and then to get their first podium at Sebring, it's been a wild journey, and I hope it ends on a massive. I hope it ends on a victory for them.
Well, the current top 3 in the GTP Championship were also the top 3 in the same order in the last round at Sebring, so that's interesting. It was a similar story actually in GTD, because the top 3 in the race at Sebring are also the top 3 in the championship, but the top 2, the order was switched. So AO Racing obviously won the race, and second place was Redline, who have won every race up until that point. Do you think this late surge from AO Racing is enough to pull them back in, or have Redline got it covered?
Before Sebring, I would have been like, Redline have it covered. Redline have it covered, easy peasy. But now I'm not so sure. The points gap is large, but there's something that I can see. I can feel that something's not going to be right. I don't know what it is or what, but something's not going to go right for someone, and that's just how Daytona goes. That's the deal of it. And especially looking at last season, we had that great battle between Apex and Redline, and it all came here. Redline got handed quite a nice thing with the issue there for Apex last season. I don't see that happening 2 years in a row. I think so. Maybe, who knows? I think iRacing might come through and come on top. Whether it's going to be enough to take the championship, I don't know, but I can see them winning this race.
I do also think that teammates are going to play a big role here.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are multiple Coanda entries, there's also multiple Redline cars. I think Redline have got the strength and depth in terms of pace, maybe not luck. Obviously the 170s had terrible luck this season, which we've talked about, but they still have the pace to be up there. We know they can do it, and they've been up there in the first round, for example, at Road Atlanta. So I really do think we could see the 170 playing a role here in this championship decider, maybe even going on and winning the race. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of a redemption arc there. I could see that happening. But the rest of the field is so closely matched. I think the big thing for me is who's got the strongest second driver. You know, who has the strongest weaker driver, so to speak. Because I think with everything so close, the reason the teams at the top have been able to stay at the top is just because of their strength and depth and consistency.
I think the bigger thing, though, is who has the strongest person behind the scenes running strategy. Because I think that will be the deciding factor around here. Strategy will be everything around here. Timing everything, making sure that your fuel numbers are perfect. Because we saw, was it Drago Racing at the end of the Sebring race?
Oh,
they
so
were running in the top 5, lap short on fuel, had to come in the pit lane. Making sure your fuel numbers are right here in Sebring is everything, because you need to shorten the time coming into the pit lane. Or, if you can, with the slipstream and stuff, shave off a pit stop if you're in the GTP category, because it will make a huge difference.
I definitely think a Daytona strategy is going to play a big role. And I also think, prize money is going to be on the line here, $25,000. So the teams fighting for the championship, they're going to be thinking of that as they're driving. And that could affect their decision making too, whether they play a safer strategy, more bold strategy. So I really think it's going to be a fascinating psychological race to watch.
Like trying to shut that part off of you, that's what makes the pros as good as they are. Because they can just shut that side off and be like, I don't care about that at the moment. After the race, before the race I do, but right now I'm focused on getting that position. They keep their head clear. That's what makes the very, very best. They're not intimidated by anything.
I do love a title decider.
Yeah.
Season finales always have such an exciting energy. You guys are about to witness one right here in the IMSA Esports Global Championship. Of course, there's prize money on the line. It's the last round of the season, so everyone's going to be going for that victory. But who will take it? You'll have to find out. It's the Michelin 240 at Daytona coming up next.
At Michelin, we don't just race for medals. We race to test, to learn, to find answers, to discover innovative ways. We race to take on challenges, to overcome technology limits, to improve the way we all move, to make possible what is not. No, at Michelin, we do not race just for glory. We race for change.
On the track, yeah, this race can be a close one. Off the track, things get even closer. Join the celebration of North America's most prestigious sports car race and get closer to the action all weekend long with free garage access, plus non-stop entertainment, autograph sessions, and more. It's the Rolex 24 at Daytona, and it doesn't get any closer than this. Secure your infield admission today at DaytonaInternationalSpeedway.com.
Trumpets blowing in the distance. Been broken, couldn't keep me down. I'm back better than ever now. These are the moments that define us. Do we run or do we ride? We're taking everything we're feeling, blowing through the ceiling. Oh, oh, oh. This is the story they remember. No peace, no surrender. You can't kill a legend. Legends never die. Oh, oh,
A new year rises, but we turn to the Daytona International Speedway to round off the IMSA Esports Global Championship. 2 hours and 40 minutes on the clock, the Michelin 240 beckons, and two champions will leave the cathedral as our kings. It's ready to go here on the iRacing Esports Network, live on IMSA TV. Can't wait to walk you through all of it. Arjuna Kenchipati alongside Peter Mackay and Joey Atterbury once again. And before we get into the nitty-gritty, yes, Max is here and racing. We're delighted as part of our Michelin wildcard program that Max Verstappen, as part of the Verstappen.com entry, joins us in the GTP class. Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team have joined us in the GTD class as well. Peter, championships to be decided. Some new drivers to talk about as well. We're in for a treat here at Daytona.
Doesn't get more cool than a new driver if you're a new four-time Formula One world champion, Max Verstappen. Sim racers know him very well. They know his passion for this type of motorsport. And I just think it's so cool to have him here and to mix it with the very best in the world in the final round of this IMSA Esports Global Championship.
Peter's over at Dubai, where the first 24-hour race of the year is just complete out in the real world. He's going to be flying over to Daytona to kick off the 24-hour event in a couple of weeks there in the real world too. But Joey, let's talk about championship here, because we're in our swing through the Sunshine State, and last week at Sebring, we set the stage for today's championship showdown.
Absolutely. Sebring, like you said, set the stage right here for Daytona. It's going to be pretty interesting in both the GTP and those GTD classes, but we started this series back at Road Atlanta just a couple months ago, and then we went up to Indianapolis after that in December. Then we went to Sebring just a short week ago, where we saw that race in Florida, but here we are at the final round, Daytona International Speedway, to close out this 4-race championship.
And the championship race for $25,000. As ever, we have BOP adjustments to bring the cars all in line. Daytona's a unique case, of course, with its banking, its high speeds, and of course, slight difference in how these drivers set the cars up as well. Lots of weight adjustment, plenty of power adjustment as well. We'll talk about the fuel numbers, though, in particular, as we get through the course of a couple of pit stops. Shout out to TFR Lab for all of their work alongside the teams and the drivers to figure this out. Because you come to this great track, Peter, and when you're there in person, you really get a sense for the scale of this great facility.
You do. It's an incredible place to go and watch racing, to visit the Rolex 24, the big 24-hour race. They'll be in its 64th edition this year. It just has an aura about it. The whole kind of almost amphitheater of the big grandstand and the infield, the atmosphere on the infield is always electric. And in a championship decided like this, the draft to the line, it doesn't have to be the Daytona 500. We've seen it many times in the Rolex 24, a 24-hour race going down to the wire. I think we're going to have something fairly similar today here in 2 hours and 40 minutes time.
And look at those winners as well. Exet in GTP, you'll see those same two drivers racing under the Channel 199 banner. GTD red line there. But let's talk about AMD Pole Award, Joey, with qualifying in the books.
Yeah, our AMD Pole Award, of course, presented by AMD, goes to this number 5 Williams Esports Chill Blast car. That is in the GTP class. This is not the first time they're going to be leading this entire field to the green flag. We'll see if they can capitalize once again today. And then in the GTD classes, the Door Esports number 120 car. This is the first time that they have snagged the pole position, that AMD Pole Award here in the IMSA Global Esports Championship. We'll see what that number 120 Corvette can do on the high banks today.
And I think that GTD class, 32-odd cars, is going to be really interesting how that battle pack plays out, traffic to play its part as well. And let's talk, I guess, championship, because GTP, Williams Esports Chill Blast, come in as the championship leaders, and so grabbing that AMD Pole Award gets them 35 championship points, but puts them in the best position possible. And Joey, maybe most importantly, I was reviewing my stat book coming into the day. Last year, no GTP team was able to win 2 races. Already, Williams Esports have won 2 races. If they can make it 3 and 4, they'll make a very good case for why they are our champions.
I think that they have definitely been the benchmark in that prototype class, and these points do include those qualifying points, which we have here in this IMSA Global Esports Championship. And like you said, Williams Esports Chill Blast leading that GTP. These are the GTD standings right here. It's been that Team Redline car. Unfortunately, their teammates nowhere to be found there, but they've got that 100-point lead over AO Racing by Coanda. But remember, Rexy, last time out, claimed a victory. We'll see what GTD is going to bring us today.
If I do the math correctly, which never trust a commentator, For Redline in GTD, 6th would be enough for them to grab the championship. Let's talk about the Michelin wildcard entries though, plural, not singular, because yes, both in GTP and in GTD. Let's start with the Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team. Ollie Steinbrat and Lorenzo Manfredotti, two brand new drivers joining that lineup as we expect to see a concerted effort from the Scuderia Ferrari team in iRacing over the course of this year, of course campaigning in that Ferrari 296 clad in the scarlet. Then in GTP, Verstappen.com Racing, Gustavo Ariel did the duty in qualifying, but yes, Max Verstappen, 4-time world champion, 63-time Grand Prix winner, will take to the start of this race, and he will be lining up in 3rd position behind the championship leader. What's he going to do in the Acura GTP, where of course he tested that car in the real world as well. Really exciting stuff as we get ready to go. I mean, Peter, let's just get a sense from you. You've just watched 24 hours of racing, but you, I'm sure, are excited about the sprint that we've got ahead of us.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of going racing, isn't it? But it's going to be multi-class traffic, of course, which is always interesting here at Daytona, because up on the banking, it's not a problem. The GTPs can get past the GTDs very well. It's when we get into the little bit more switchback sections, into the two horseshoes, we've got to be a little bit more clever. But the good thing about Daytona is that the sim racers, particularly here on iRacing, have a huge amount of experience at this track.
Let's take a look at the Michelin starting grid trackside from Daytona. Joey, walk us through the GTPs.
Yeah, the GTP starts out with that Williams Esports Chill Blast. The driver, Jade Munoz, is going to be leading the field to the green flag. Next to him is going to be Marcus Hamilton there in 2nd place. Max Verstappen, your 4-time world champion, starting in 3rd place. Juri Leitinen in 4th place right here. Chris Lullum in 5th, with Dominic Hoffman starting in the 6th position spot in that number 89 car. And 7th is going to be Maxime Briant. Next to him is going to be Christian Hilgard in the 8th spot. 9th is going to be Casey Kerwin with Mitchell de Jong there in 10th place. Scott Michaels is going to start off in 11th on row number 6. Johan Royer next to him there in 12th place in the car number 6 car. And then in 13th place position is going to be Max Muir. Remember that Solpec Precision Racing car was on the podium last round out at Sebring with that black cat. Manuel Kubo is going to be starting in 14th, with Sean Campbell back here 15th. Marino Sarica in 16th, and Xander Reed is going to be rounding out those 17 GTP cars.
A couple of teams penalized for late replacements of drivers, but in GTDs, it's the Corvette that storms its way to the front. Damon Woods in the 120 will be alongside Nicholas Rubilar in the Lamborghini. Two teams just looking for a win to close out the season, and then Johan Hoff, the best qualifying effort from the Mercedes-AMG Apex Racing team, alongside the Mag Performance Sim Racing team, another one of the Corvettes really flying the flag up front. AO Racing by Kawanda. Rexy's got a golden tooth after the win last week at the Gridfinder 240. Within its championship fight, it's still got some work to do, and alongside another one in the Mercedes for Apex. Nicholas Matteo for Drago inside of Alexander Davidson. Lamborghini's pretty quick in qualifying, with G2, Yoni Katia in the Ford Mustang alongside of Beckham Jasir in the Williams Esports Mercedes AMG. Ollie Steinbrad and Ferrari Esports are going to drop back after a penalty for slight registration in the session. They'll be alongside the newly renamed PGZ and P1 Docs 114 up there in the championship fight, and looking to try and close off on a high as well. Redline have some work to do. 13th and 15th for the 170 and the 171. Guillaume Levesque, a sandwich there in the 56 Racing Corvette. BS Plus Turner, they'll drop to the back of the field at the very start of this race for a slight infringement in qualifying and going down to the apron. World Sim Racing Esports, their second Lamborghini's in 17th, and alongside Cody Deeth in the 103 for the Grid and Go Lamborghini, Ferrari, excuse me. And we're only getting in towards the mid-pack of this starting grid, where we get to the second of the PGZ Porsches. Alongside, you find Miguel Costa for gridandgo.com. That's your top 20. Solpec Precision Racing alongside of Marla Racing's BMW, Lassie Urin and Sontex 131 inside of the sister car for Mag Performance, all the way back in the field for Pierpaolo Repucci. Still have about 8 more cars to work through in the sports car category. Lorenzo Castellani in the McLaren 407 Racing. He's alongside of series debutant Corentin Lassin for Valkyrie's Ford Mustang. Sammy Matty Trogan, a lot of work for him to do in the 113 BMW for Sontec. He's got the big green machine of Maniti Racing and Chris Van Den Ness for Company. Impulse and Door Esports, one up towards the very front, one down towards the very back, unfortunately, as Liam Willman finds himself mired a little bit further down. Oscar Mangan, Jaden Conright, Vesta and Channel 199. A couple of penalties there again for late race replacements. As you see the sunrise in the background, confirmation of the qualifying bands, 4 of them that have come on down, but Peter, as the field pulls away in towards Le Mans Chicane, walk us through today's Michelin keys to the race.
So here at Daytona, there's lots to consider, lots to think about in this Michelin keys to the race. The main thing is when you're up on the banking, you're to stay up on that banking, because it's if you get down on that flat part, it's seriously tricky down there. So watch out for that for those Michelin keys to race. Make sure to use the draft as best as you possibly can and keep safe. Remember, this could go right down to the wire here. Don't fall off the banking. Watch those closing speeds at certain points. When you go into the bus stop chicane, the new Le Mans chicane, it's big closing speed difference between the GTPs and the GTDs. And remember what you're racing for: big cash prizes and the honor of being the IMSA Esports Global Champion.
And in many ways, we're all building up, right? Next week's the iRacing Daytona 24, one of the biggest sim races of the year. And then a week later, it all rolls back here to the World Center of Racing for the Rolex 24. But let's throw 2 hours and 40 minutes on the clock, and let's get our championship sorted here in the IMSA Esports Global Championship. Let's go for the Michelin 240. Off the banking, the GTPs will work, and in towards turn 1, unchallenged, are the points leaders initially. Verstappen.com, throw it up the inside though, and Max Verstappen will push Williams Esports Chill Blast towards the back of the field. BMW M Team Redline will take over the lead into the International Horseshoe, but championship drama already. Over to the GTDs as the Corvette for Door Esports will lead us down to turn number 1. And Peter, unbelievable scenes here at the World Center of Racing.
I'm in shock. I'm in total shock. I mean, Max Verstappen here as a wild card entry, but remember, he's a Team Redline driver and Williams are Redline's biggest rival. So to take out the biggest rival at the first corner as a wild card, you don't need me to say that that's controversial.
That's going to lead to plenty of talking, that is for sure. Rest of the field's going to scamper through, and I think mostly safely. There's a couple of side-by-side moments for the GTDs through the kink. AO Racing by Kawanda. Rexy watching up the inside as out through the Western Horseshoe they will fly, but GTP's up to the Le Mans chicane. Kawanda going to make the move. A good move there as well on the fiercely forward Cadillac for what is 7th and 8th position. Mitchell de Jong holding on to that spot, but Joey up to the end of lap number 1, and already the gap's building at the front of the field.
Yeah, it is that Team Redline car of Chris Lolum leading that end of lap number 1. You see Rexy on the bottom of the screen, still headed towards that Le Mans chicane for the first time. He's actually slipped down just a couple positions. They're in 5th place with that green Porsche. Door Esports, remember, that was your pole sitter in the GTD class. They still maintain that lead as they go through that Le Mans chicane for the very first time.
Side by side between some of the prototypes. Channel 199 left on the outside. Remember, those are the 2 drivers that won last year under the XEP banner, so expecting them to run relatively well. But now in towards the kink, CrowdStrike Racing alongside and looking to try and hold strong. Pablo Lazar going to send it 3 abreast into the Western Horseshoe. Caught napping there with Jari Lettinen for race clutch, and the 2-for-1 special pushed out onto the grass. Good reaction there from Kerwin to avoid getting tangled up. Scott Michaels takes advantage. This is exactly what you expect though at the start of a race like this, Peter.
Yeah, we even see this in the Rolex 24-hour, and we'll see it in the iRacing Daytona 24-hour as well before things kind of settle into a rhythm. Big move there from that number 3 CrowdStrike Acura up the inside of the Western Horseshoe. Great move actually. Really strong as the GTDs all gaggled together, and in there the Valkyrie competition Mustang, which I'd be surprised if their driver Alexei Nezov is taking part. He may well be, but he finished the race here in Dubai, finished 2nd overall at the Dubai 24 hours about 10 hours ago. So he might be at the rig.
3 wide up towards turn 6. Squeezed off into the grass goes Redline, and they'll just about hold on. That is the car fighting for the championship, and so I don't dare do the math right now. They're down in 20th. Their rivals AO Racing by Kawanda up in 5th. but I dare say championship is taking a swing as it stands right now in the GTD class, and confirmation on the right side of the screen, Joey, 50 points to the good for Rexy.
And that's huge. Remember, they won at Sebring just a week ago, so they're trying to carry that momentum in just a nightmare start, and probably not the best qualifying for this Team 171, that Team Redline car. So they've got a lot of work to do to get themselves towards the front of the field, where Rexy already is, and looking pretty good, if I might say so.
It's about a 10-position swing per... a 10-point swing per position, I should say. So for Redline, if they can gain 5 more spots, that would be enough, theoretically, going back to tiebreakers. But if iRacing by Kawanda are able to get the victory here, changes the map very drastically, because they're up at the very tip-top of the field. We'll have to figure out strategy, though. As we work our way through this race, we know that fuel mileage does tend to play its part as well, and seemingly plenty of clean air behind these drivers. So it does seem as though we're building up to a bit of a battle pack at the front of this GTD field, and we're still waiting for the first pass through of traffic. GTPs are just coming back to the line, so give it maybe 4 more laps or so, Peter, and we may start to see the thick of the traffic.
Yeah, and that could well split up with the way that the GTDs are kind of formed at the moment. They're in one big line, and if you're in that leading train, say 3rd or 4th car back, you're in a perfect spot, because you can get a whole bunch of fuel saving done. The only issue is when the prototypes start coming through, that is really going to mix the pack up, and then you don't want to lose that lead train. So so important in GTD particularly to be in that slipstream, because as soon as you lose it, it's so difficult to get back onto that leading pack.
One thing just to keep in mind is that no rain expected for these drivers today, but when we talk about the iRacing Daytona 24 powered by VCO next week, there is the forecast, of course, of a little bit of moisture in the air, and so the strategy equation may be a little bit different for the drivers planning out for next week, but for these drivers, as bone dry as you would like, and instead it's just the sunrise that we will see. We're only 5 minutes in. We have just ticked past about 6:50 virtual standard time, so about 45 minutes we will be well and truly in the throes of the morning, and the headlights will not really be a necessity. Lead gap, it's up to 1.5 seconds. Dominic Hoffman, I think, has just got a slowdown out through the Le Mans chicane, and so CrowdStrike slipped their way forward. Draft's been broken. And that's important, Joey, because we're going to get to the traffic, I think, on this very lap, and Redline will be in a sea by themselves, carving through the GTDs.
You mentioned the traffic, and this is exactly what they're going to have to go through. I think we're going to get a replay of what happened exactly on the initial start of the race with the prototypes here as these cars make their way through the infield section. He gets a little bit of a good jump, and then there's probably 1 or 2 car lengths between himself and that Williams car. He sends it right up the inside, tries to get it stopped, gets loose right here, makes a little bit of contact with the Williams car, spins himself over the nose, but the damage is already done for that Verstappen entry, as well as that Williams Esports Chill Blast car. They're going to have to dig themselves out of that big old hole.
I will say, if there's any team that can bounce back from this, it is going to be Williams Esports, who won, 3 of the 4 VCO Grand Slams last year. It's just going to be the question of how they can move forward through the field, maybe use strategy to their advantage as well. We talked about it a little bit in the Countdown to Green presented by Traction. You heard John Monroe, Lewis McLeod wondering a little bit how strategy might play out. We'll keep an eye on that. One detail that we did talk about at the start of the show, Peter, but after their win last week, the Gridfinder 240 saw iRacing by Kawanda and Rexy in victory lane. So what did they do? What they needed to. They've got a virtual golden tooth now on the car, as we see. A penalty for the registration infringement for one of our wildcard entries, Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team.
That's frustrating for one of our wildcard entries, and at this level that puts you so on the back foot. And it's different to what we see in the IMSA WeatherTech Championship, where we get interventions with full course yellow, the safety car comes out and it brings the pack back together. Here we don't have that. It's a straight sprint to the flag, no safety cars. So if you do have a penalty like that, it's at this level virtually impossible to recover from.
Through the traffic, I think I saw at least 1 car off the track. Might have been Peter Zuber for gridandgo.com, but this is the perspective riding on board with Casey Kerwin. Dominic Hoffman making his debut for BMW M Team BS Plus competition. is going to be able to work his way through the field, but you can see the pressure building on him. Slow down a lap or so ago, gets to the inside of the Ferrari for Team Redline, and 1-2 has to now go up high. That's the coordination, the shuffle that these teams and drivers have all been practicing. Dip back down into the low line to get a little bit of the draft. Try and take the shortest distance as you can. You'll get a bit of a breathing gap now up towards that newly renamed Le Mans chicane. And here on iRacing, grass on either side as well to punish you if you get stuck behind a slower class car though, Joey. As you saw there, the gaps can really balloon on up.
They can expand quite drastically very, very quickly. So you got to be able to stay in that draft train. We're going to see if Hoffman's going to make a move here on Pablo Lazar. He dips out to driver's right. That's going to be the longer way around. But these prototypes can do tremendous things here in turn number 1, right back into the tire track. So no change of position right there. But traffic management, right? It's always a part to these races, these multi-class races. But I think here at Daytona, it's a different beast. It's a draft track. So those GT cars, they stay packed up the entire time. And it's almost like working through rush hour traffic versus just traffic management.
Absolutely. Not the greatest run off the corner for CrowdStrike, and it will swap around. Reminder of the GTD championship battle. It's still 40 points or so the gap, but now it's swung back in the favor of Team Redline's 171. They've climbed their way up to 13th position. Remember, if my math serves correctly, 6th would be good enough for the Ferrari of Redline to grab the championship. AO Racing by Kawanda, they need to win and then really hope that Redline can not really continue to move their way through the field. In terms of GTP, we're a long way from the end. Something to keep in mind, of course, is it is going to be BMW and Team Redline that have the championship lead there. Williams Esports Chill Blast on their recovery, though, already back up to 11th.
Making great moves forward, and yeah, I think if you're Williams Esports Chill Blast, they're going to be really hot under the collar after that first corner, and they're going to be pushing hard. And we've seen how strong their pace was. They were dominant at Sebring. They had a great win at Road Atlanta. So you're absolutely right, Arjuna. If anyone's going to catch it back up, it's Williams Esports Chill Blast. But right now, this battle between the 89 BS Competition BMW and the 95 Channel 199 Sim Racing crew, really intriguing. And the 199 crew, they've been one of the revelations of this championship for me. And Casey Kerwin, he's been the star of the show. He's been one of my standout drivers all season.
And I mean, Casey's just proven, you know, that he's got the skill set to do basically anything he wants. That includes in the dirt category of things as well. Would be very interested to see Casey go out and venture into the world of Outlaws once again. You can see how close it is, though, between Redline up front and Williams Esports Chill Blast in second. Now, 20 is leading. They cannot get any more points from this race, right? They will get 350 for winning. For Williams Esports Chill Blast, effectively 4 more positions, which again, never trust a commentator's math, but I think anything higher than 7th or higher, the 5 rather, is still the champions.
Well, and there's still a ton of racing left, right? We're only, call it 12 minutes into this thing, and I know that Chill Blast, they're not in the position that they want to be right now, but I think that they'll be able to recover from this. I'm looking at my timing and scoring, and they've got, what is this, about 4 or 5 cars directly in front of them, and each one only has, call it about 2 or 3 tenths of a second between each car as we get some Ferraris bump drafting down the back straightaway here towards that Le Mans chicane. So back to Chill Blast, I think that they're well on the recovery drive, and they just need to keep chugging along. You're not going to make it all up in one lap.
You can see some of the drivers involved in incidents slowly rolling their way out of pit lane, trying to avoid getting tangled up in these little battles. One thing to note about the Acura as it gets pushed out wide, it's on the short gear stack at Daytona, which you might think is a surprise, but it's got a great amount of acceleration out of some of these corners, and so up towards the Western Horseshoe, brave on the brakes. It's commitment there from Pablo Lazar, but equally, Jere Lettinen's not sleeping like he was in the opening couple of laps of the race. Back and forth they go. Inside of turn 6 will go the way of the Acura, but onto the banking. Race clutch finally lose out.
Great battling there, but tell you what, these CrowdStrike Acuras look so strong with that little 2.4 V6 working really well and getting past the Cadillac dog race clutch there. So despite that fairly significant BOP adjustment, the Acura needs to be a little bit pared back. It's in there in 4th and 5th position, just 7.3 seconds off the lead right now. But they can actually work together to try and get closer to that Channel 199 sim racing car and indeed the 89 BMW, Joey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that familiar white, orange, and purple car. That's that Coanda Esports machine. They're sitting in 7th place right now. So really that entire prototype field up front, very closely packed together as we ride on board the roof here of the number 102 car in the GT class. This is one of those awesome sounding Ferraris, the gridandgo.com esports machine. They're currently sitting in 13th place. The reason why we're on board with them, directly in front is that Team 171, that Team Redline car. That is our championship leader. They're trying to make their way forward through the field still.
And as they power off the banking, now just maybe we'll think about fuel saving as well. This is where as you get to the end of the straight, sometimes you get around the start-finish line early in these stints and you'll lift off. But talking about strategy, a big component of strategy here in the IMSA Esports Global Championship and across of all IMSA championships is tire management. And so earlier in the week, I caught up with Raymond Cotton, Director of Motorsports North America for Michelin. And I asked him a little bit about how exactly Michelin views its partnership with IMSA, both on and off the track.
Yeah, so great question. You know, the partnership with IMSA, it's a long-standing partnership. We've been in the partnership for several years and plan to be in it long-term. It's a really great partnership for us. What the IMSA platform really does is allow us to push innovation, push technology, but also push sustainability. So we really use the IMSA platform as a way to push technology and sustainability together to really drive our product technology and our product portfolio forward.
And we've been so excited that Michelin is a supporter of the IMSA Esports Global Championship since our very first season in 2022. How does Michelin view esports and the opportunity that it presents to connect with a new audience of race car fans that typically you may not have access to at a racetrack?
Great question. You know, I think when we look at esports and you look at the rise of the popularity of it, I mean, it's just growing and growing, you know, whether it's iRacing, whether it's Gran Turismo, I mean, just the esports in general are just taking off. And for Michelin and really our focus, you know, when you look at Michelin's focus and you look at growing our audience and you look at reaching new audiences, esports is a great equitable way for people to get into racing, right? And so for us, it really aligns with a strategy of reaching out and gaining more audience, gaining new audience, and then, you know, it's converting people who necessarily weren't race fans into race fans. And of course, race fans are usually passionate consumers, so it gives us a connection to new consumers, also a younger audience. So areas that are very interesting for Michelin.
I remember last season we talked to someone who had the title of a senior virtual tire designer at Michelin, which I still think is one of the coolest job titles that I've ever seen. But how does Michelin view simulation, which I guess does include gaming as a component of it, but simulation as a way to maximize performance on the track itself?
As racing pushes more sustainable, and then also budgets are getting expensive. So anything you can do in the simulation front is not only good for the sustainability of the sport, but it's also good for cost control, right? And so we spend a lot of time and effort with simulation tools to provide our teams with the ability to really know what the tire piece is doing in their driver and loop simulation, right? So we have several companies that's what they focus on and that's what they do, and they really work with the teams to maximize that aspect for the team, right? To really get a really accurate model of what the tire will do, and what the tire will do as it heats up, and allow them to put that into their simulation tools, right? So both for their driver, but for their vehicle development. So that's kind of the first question. And then the next question, part of the question is, that really goes right into the iRacing or the esports, right? So you take those type of models and you feed those in, so you get realistic grip, you get realistic progressivity of the product, right? And so you really are making that simulator for the general public a much more accurate experience by using those same types of tools.
Big thank you to Raymond Codden, Director of Motorsports, for taking some time to chat with us earlier in the week. You can see the sun continues to rise, nearing on 20 minutes complete here for the Michelin 240, the final round of the IMSA Esports Global Championship, and we had plenty of drama at the start. We've just about got into our second cycle through of traffic, but before that, Peter, take a look at an incident down to the International Horseshoe, Lamborghini versus Mercedes.
Yeah, this is Apex Racing Team and the Mercedes trying to stuff it up the inside of the Drago Lamborghini and gets it all wrong there at the International Horseshoe. Manages to recover without a great deal of damage, but just going to lose so much time there, and the Drago Lamborghini gets on with it. I mean, this is, you can tell this is last day of school, last day of the season finale. It's yeah, there's some real aggression out there in certain places, and of course Daytona is normally used as the season opener, has been for many years in American and indeed global sports car racing. But actually in the past, IMSA used to have their final race of the season, the Daytona finale, Into the Darkness, Under the Lights, in the past, in the 70s, which was won by Peter Gregg, Hurley Haywood, all the legends there in the 70s. So Daytona definitely is a great venue for a season finale, a showdown for the championship.
I do like it, right? It adds a little bit of thrill because there's high speeds as well. We might be 4 wide, we're 3 wide for sure, and G2 get tagged by the BMW BS Plus competition car, and around the outside, well, they got dinged by race control for a pass around the outside at Sebring. Casey Kerwin is up to second, and slicing and dicing through traffic, 3.8 seconds off of your race lead. BMW M Team Redline are through the thick of the GTD field, but watch out, Joey, there's a Cadillac on the hunt. Off out of the Western Horseshoe. I think Joey might have forgotten to hit the unmute button.
Yeah, you caught me. You know, Peter did it last time. It's my turn this time, and you're right. That is square on my shoulders as we're watching Casey Kerwin, as well as that BMW climb up those high banks, stand on that gas over there. Sorry to throw you under the bus, but you know what? It was my turn this time. My bad.
It's all right. It's never happened to me before. Definitely never on an IMSA Esports broadcast in the 3 years that we've had happen. Not once, not twice, but maybe 3 times. Off towards the bottom, you can see just how that move played out. I think quite lucky, actually, for the GTP. I did see that for G2 Esports, Yoni Katia required the tow back to pit lane. And so that's going to be, I think, maybe day done for the 162. A bit of a shame in what is their swan song with the team. Both Yoni and Isaac Price going to be leaving G2 Esports at the conclusion of the race. Back over to the very front of the field, though, where 2 Corvettes running very strongly, a Mercedes tucked in behind, Lamborghini then running in 4th. Some new names and new faces, Peter, at the front of the GTD field.
There is, yeah. Good to see the Corvettes making a run at the front. They had a more difficult start to the season, but definitely a strong package here at Daytona. That 5.5 litre flat crank V8, given the power on the high banks. The one thing about Daytona is just you can never have enough horsepower. You can use it all. When you're looking like the early 80s with the monstrous Porsche 935s and the power they used to chuck out around the banking, I can imagine trying to hang on to one of those things. But nowadays, the power coming from a GT car, yeah, it depends on which car it is, but around 500 to 550 horsepower. GDPs, they've got quite a lot more. They've got 670 horsepower, 70 of which coming from the electric motor, of course.
I would like that in my car, please, in terms of power. These GTPs, though, you can see the way they actually generate their speed. Slightly different from the DPIs of old. They've got the hybrid, of course, that kicks in, but they're a little bit heavier, maybe a little bit more lumbering sometimes through the corners, and so there's some places where LMP2's GTDs can be a little bit more nimble and quick as they line their way up through all of it. This lead train, as often you find at Daytona, draft trains build, seemingly goes back to 16th position already with 2 cycles through of traffic. But already, GTD has been quite heavily hit in terms of attrition. 32 started, only 24 of whom have not had to make a trip down towards the pit lane. Still side by side. This time with Williams Esports Chill Blast, they try and recover their way back up through the field. They're holding off a pair of yellow and black cars, Grid and Go and Solpec Precision Racing. As it sits right now, still 39 points between the championship rivals. So, got to think, if you're the number 5, you want to defend at this time.
Remember that Solpec car, the green and black car that's on the outside, drivers left. They were on the podium just a week ago at Sebring, but neck and neck with gridandgo.com. That's the esports, the prototype entry. They're going to get on the gas, and it's still going to be that drag race. So it comes down to that horsepower that you guys were just talking about. Who's going to have more horsepower on the banking? I think the BOP right now looking tremendous. Look at this, side by side. The only reason why that bottom car has got a little bit of advantage, shorter distance around, and he had a little bit of the draft, but going into the chicane, clears himself over the nose. That was an aggressive driver move.
And that was a nice move from Manuel Cubo Torres to follow through as well for Simufy. And Acura is up a position. Remember, I was saying that car is, for most teams, on the short gear stack, which will give them plenty of acceleration. But contrary to what some would think, short gear stack maybe gives you a low top speed. They seemingly have plenty of top-end grunt as well, given that CrowdStrike have maximized the car quite well. They run up in 4th position in that number 3 at this time. So plenty of battling, plenty of little draft trains as well in that GTD equation. And Peter, if you've got a couple of team cars to work with, it's often a benefit. The only thing to think about, though, no bump drafting. This is not the Great American Race.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth, Arjuna. I'm thinking about the former GTP Championship leader as things stand on the live points. Number 5, Williams Esports Chill Blast, that we've got on the top of your screen right now, which is sitting in 11th in GTP, qualified on pole, of course, involved in a fairly dramatic incident, to say the least, at turn 1. If I was the Williams Esports team, I would be getting on the radio straight away to car 33, the sister car for Williams Esports, to get him to slow down, because they need to work together. If they're going to move forward in this race, they have to use the draft to their advantage. And the 33 car does not have a championship axe to grind necessarily, so you get, but whereas the 5 car does. So if you've got that extra bullet in the gun as an extra car, you've got to bring it into play. So if I was the Williams Esports team manager, I'd be straight on the radio saying you need to back off and you need to help the 5 car.
All about those team decisions, and that hole in the air that is punched is very important here at Daytona. It's got a great amphitheater feel. I think it was Peter that mentioned it, and you know, there are certain points in the grandstands where you can just go and you can sit and watch everything around the track. You've got an ability to watch things at turn 1, but equally opposite end of the track at the bus stop, the Le Mans chicane. A pretty good view of what happens there. And that banking, if you do go out for the Rolex 24 in a couple of weeks, go for the grid walk, because Joey, you've got to experience what the banking is really like.
100%. And as a fan, you can go out there and climb on the tri-oval. So you talk about the grid walk, and sure, it's neat to get up close to the drivers and the cars and really see what that is like. But you're right there on the tri-oval at start-finish line, the entire infield is open. So if you've got a ticket to Daytona here in a couple weeks, go out there. You can climb up the tri-oval and realize how steep it is. And then you're like, well, holy smokes, the corners 1, 2, 3, and 4 are actually banked steeper than the tri-oval here. It's pretty drastic.
GTD lap times around 1:44.2s right now at the front of the field. Your GTP leaders, 1:29.6 was the best lap for Chris Lullum, Silly Lully up front. He's doing 1:30s or so as they work through the traffic. The lead in the GTPs, 5 seconds, and it is BMW MT and BS Plus competition promoted back up into second in front of the Cadillac once again, with CrowdStrike Racing not far behind them. So we are about 30 minutes complete with the race, which means here at Daytona, only around 10, maybe 15 minutes away from opening up the pit stop windows for those prototypes.
That's right, yeah, and will we see perhaps Williams Esports Chill Blast number 5 try to play some tricks to try and move forward and to try to make up for lost time after that incident at the first corner? And for the GTDs, we could see some cars that have managed to save a whole bunch of fuel in this opening stint because they're in a nice, neat line. Even the prototypes coming through hasn't really split them up that much. So, you know, you've got a train from first down to seventh covered by 2 seconds, so they're all pulling each other along. The only exception to that is the Doer Esports car that leads the way, the 120. It's not got any car ahead. Now, you're thinking, with the slipstream, in normal circumstances, you would see that car be overtaken quite easily with the way that the slipstream works. But the car behind, the Mac Performance car, doesn't want to go past because they can still hold position and have way less throttle input and use the slipstream to maintain their lap speed, but by you doing that with less fuel usage. And every car further back in the train, they're all just soft throttling all the way through almost every corner, and even on the straight you'll actually see them almost coming out the throttle to about 90% on the highest point of the straight, and the slipstream just pulling them along. So the level of fuel saving being done in this bunch can be intriguing to see who's got it best.
Well, let's listen in and see if we can figure out just how much fuel saving is going on. Rexy got a golden tooth a week ago. Let's listen in, powered by Thrustmaster, riding with Tristan Iglesias. A little bit of fuel saving, but maybe not too much through the chicane. Here's the point situation with the 171. The Team Redline Ferrari up 5 positions to 10th. Now leads by 60 points in the overall equation. Although Rexy has been content to sit and I think ride and save some fuel for the time being. 2 hours and 10 minutes to go. There's a long race still left in many ways, but Peter, I think you've got to assume here if you're Rexy, you're playing for the checkered flag rather than right now.
Yeah, you've got to, and for Rexy, the AO Porsche by Coanda, they're just trying to save as much fuel as possible. That's the name of the game right now, and hope that efficiency is going to get them to move forward. Don't get me wrong, this is going to go to a last lap dogfight, and it's going to be about who gets the timing just right coming out of the Le Mans chicane. I'll never ever forget a couple of years ago the Rolex 24 at Daytona with the LMP2 battle between the CrowdStrike car and the Proton competition car, and it was a total draft battle all the way out from the Le Mans chicane all the way around the super speedway, and it went to the line, and it was probably about half a Michelin tires width difference between them after 24 hours of racing. Only 2 hours and 40 minutes racing today, but I think the margins are going to be just as close.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what a real-world race of 2 hours and 40 minutes would look like around Daytona currently. I mean, Verstappen.com Racing probably have a pretty good perspective. Now, to get a drive-through penalty for their part in the shenanigans at turn number 1, Max with a, let's be honest, egregious send down to the opening corner. But if anyone was going to make it stick, you probably trust him as the experience he has both in the real and virtual worlds. He did, of course, win the GTD class of the iRacing Daytona 24 last year, albeit in the GTDs with his Team Redline teammates at the time. He's got 35 seconds off the race lead right now. It's 15 seconds off the cars in front of him, so we're keeping an eye on exactly how much he's going to be able to close and if there's going to be any progress in terms of the rest of the race. Left side of the screen, you can see the entirety of the GTP field.
Important to note, though, the performance out of this number 27. Max has got the lap times sizzling right now. That last lap, a 130.3. Compare that to our leader, a 131.0. Now, I know that there's a lot of traffic that happens here at Daytona. That last lap from the Team Redline leader was in clean air, so I think that this Verstappen.com entry, it's got plenty of speed. It's just a matter of when they're going to catch back up to the rest of the field.
Yep, and again, they are one of 2 Michelin wildcards for today. The other one being in the GTD class, the Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team with Ole Steinbrat and Lorenzo Manfredodi making their debut. Expecting this team to, in a week's time, make a pretty good showing of themselves in the iRacing Daytona 24 powered by VCO. You can see on the side of their car, they've got the 51. That's not the correct number, and so they had a penalty at the start of the race, unfortunately, for filling out the paperwork incorrectly is the best analogy for it. But let's see exactly what the rest of the year is going to bring for them. Sean Campbell's in the second of the race clutch entries. The number 23, which currently is sat back in 8th, crosses the line. His best lap time's a 1:29, but last lap he did a 1:32.233, and that is why. Look at all of that traffic.
That's crazy. Interesting there, listening to the note from that 5.5 litre V8 in the middle of the Cadillac of Sean Campbell. Not much fuel saving at all there. That's interesting, slightly different program for the GTP driver, certainly in the case of Sean Campbell for race clutch. GTDs, as we heard on board with Rexy, going very much fuel saving mode. So interesting difference there between the two classes on how important or not fuel saving actually is.
I guess maybe there is a component of it. Ask the driver in the broadcast booth, but Joey, you maybe think less about the fuel saving in that instant because you're in traffic and you're thinking, right, let me gain a little bit more time, or maybe you've looked up in front of you and you're trying to judge exactly how much distance you're leaving to the next group that you're trying to catch.
It is a case-by-case situation. However, if you start to not save fuel in certain areas, you can kind of trip yourself into that tendency, and all of a sudden a few laps go by and you're actually in the hole on that fuel saving deal. So you need to be smart about it, and even if there's an opportunity that you need to kind of squirt the throttle in there, maybe manage it a little bit better. But I will say that fuel saving is always games here at Daytona, and then fuel saving and the pit stop strategy has been games this entire season. All 3 races, these drivers and teams, they're not necessarily putting in a full thing of fuel every single pit stop time here. So if you're not fuel saving as much, what is that difference between taking a little bit more gas during the pit stop versus being able to save it out on the racetrack?
Yeah, especially pertinent, I think, in the GTD class, where the way that pit stop structure has worked out is you're kind of trying to divvy up the pit stop time and decide, do you want a shorter stop at the end of the race or maybe be a bit more equal across all of your different pit stop stints. Remember, no rain on the horizon for these drivers, as you may expect in next week's iRacing Daytona 24 powered by VCO. Instead, what we get, Peter, you've experienced it plenty of times as well, the glorious sunrise at the World Center of Racing.
There is nothing quite like it. I remember when I experienced it as a fan, effectively, in January 2020, and that Florida sunrise at Daytona is something that every race fan needs to experience. It's a truly special time as the race is roaring on and the sun just appears and the dimmer switch begins to turn and Daytona becomes out of its nighttime slumber and it comes alive once again. It's a truly special time. If you've never been, get yourself to the Rolex 24. Even if it's not this year, get yourself booked in for next year. It's an endurance racing experience that everyone has to have at least once.
Absolutely. Went there last year. Might still convince myself to buy a flight and camp out there. When I say camp out, literally sleep in the grandstands overnight. Don't need a hotel room. We'll keep it as simple as we can, but very tempted to do that as well. So, 40-odd minutes about to be complete. It's 7.3 seconds at the front of the field for BMW M Team Redline over the BMW M Team BS Plus competition. I think maybe they are just being a little bit more aggressive through the traffic situation that they have. No one behind them as well. Working very nicely. No one else to fight with in their respective situation. GTD started with 32 there. As mentioned, attrition has played its part. But effectively, the lead grouping now down to just 12.
I think the race is going to continue on for the next 2 hours here as we're going to get a little bit of a look of what it would exactly be like to be here at Daytona, at the Speedway. This is pretty much going to be on the outside of what is turn 5 and 6, watching these GT cars roll through the kink, jump on the brakes, and then manage that car balance of understeer versus oversteer, working their way through what is turn number 5 right there. And if you are fortunate to have an RV parked trackside, climb up on the roof, then you get to watch them stand on the gas all the way around the high banks.
I can tell you, there is a small little grandstand, probably only fits shy of 100 people inside of turn 6. And sitting there, you get to hear the cars downshift, and it reverberates around you. And we don't have LMP2s in the field here. It's only GTP and GTD, but the LMP2s on downshift there, one of the best sounds that I've ever heard in motorsports, and that includes the old Porsche GT-LMs. You saw there, it's a penalty that was handed down at the start of the race for some of the aggression that was being played around, drivers being very, very aggressive the first time through of traffic. It has definitely settled down a little bit more since then. One thing that we've just been keeping an eye on for Williams Esports Chill Blast, remember, in that championship fight, Joey, it does seem as though struggling maybe a bit with damage, and they are now in 14th and struggling almost to hold on.
Yeah, I was just kind of going back and looking at all the laps and everything, seeing exactly where they're struggling. The lap times don't seem too terribly off, you know, minute 30, minute 31s on some of these working their way through traffic. So evidently there's definitely some damage on that number 5 Chill Blast car. I'm sure they'll get it fixed once they come back down into the pit lane there and get that thing fixed up. But this is our GT class. I've been pretty impressed right now with this Door Esports car. Remember, they were your pole sitter. They've led every single lap so far. And not only that, but we've actually got 2 Corvettes sitting 1 and 2 right now. That's that MAG Performance SRT 151 in second place.
And the Corvettes, if I remember in terms of BOP correctly, they had a slight hit in terms of power, a slight increase in terms of weight as well, but they do have the full amount of fuel, so they shouldn't be too worried about fuel numbers maybe up front. Confirmation, another intervention from race control. Drive-through penalty for the 199. That was for contact with Team Redline's 170, and so defending the champions technically, that was the 170 car. 4 for 4 in crashing out of the race, unfortunately. 40 minutes complete, 2 hours left. In the Michelin 240, we jump on board with Sean Campbell. GTP's working through some traffic, back onto the banking.
This is what it's all about here at Daytona, watching the GTPs making their way through. And speaking of GTP, it's getting worse, not better, for your former championship leaders on the live points. Williams Esports Chill Blast are down to 14th place now. That is a disaster. So I wonder if they're carrying some sort of damage from that contact with Max Verstappen's Acura at turn 1, and that's holding them back. So you would think that as soon as the pit window opens, which it can't be very far away from at all, they need to get in and get that repaired and hope that the race comes to them. And because the other GTPs, they're already starting their pit stops as BS Competition and CrowdStrike Acura both coming into the pit road for the first time.
Well, we just got word from our production team that they were looking at the lap times, and it doesn't seem as though they're poor individual lap times. It might just be maybe a bit of preservation mode as well in part of that. 40 minute stints here are relatively short compared to what we've seen at other tracks, but given the nature, you're on the banking for 2.5 miles, full blast as well, using as much energy as you can. Maybe to be expected that you are down to pit lane just slightly earlier than is expected. GTDs, plenty of them still out there. Let's listen in to the bump start though, as GTP's down on pit lane. Still waiting for race clutch to roll, probably getting a healthy dose of fuel as well as Jari Lehtinen. Still makes me grin like a little kid.
And it's something that I'm watching over on pit lane right now. We were just talking about the damage to that Chill Blast car. They did get some of that front nose damage fixed up. They had quite a bit of front end damage between the splitter, the front bumper, those air intake ducts. So we'll see if that number 5 is now fixed up in terms of that lap time as Max Verstappen completes his stop.
And you can see an attempted move there from Johan Harth and the Mercedes Apex Racing team. The 198, meanwhile, it's a blend on pit lane. Uncomfortable for some of these drivers in the GTP classes. Channel 199 Sim Racing up on the jacks and getting a fresh set of Michelin tires, full tank of energy and fuel as well. And then off through the kink slide the GTD cars to see some of those GTPs on cold tires, let's not forget. Back out onto track, and now having to move onto the marbles and pass them as well. You can actually see the marble accumulation offline here. 2 hours and 40 minutes is one thing, Peter. After 24 hours, the marbles are a whole other level.
They are, yes. You got to watch for them. Those watch out for that pickup off the line as the Coanda effectively works for the team. Going to fire up that V8. There it is. That V8's got some heritage behind it. It was first conceived all the way back in 2005 during the development of the RS Spider. It was a brand new engine at that point, a 3.4 litre V8 naturally aspirated. It was then used in the 918 hypercar, the street car, and now a 4.6 twin turbo unit in this latest GTP car. So very cool to see Porsche Penske Motorsport using effectively a similar, well, using the same base powertrain in the RS Spider that has gone all the way through to this latest Porsche prototype.
All the powertrains in the GTP class have an interesting heritage behind them and a story behind them as well. Love that the regulations were open enough that manufacturers were encouraged to bring something to the party without being so prescribed that they had to go out and spend even more to accommodate, and that's why we've seen such an expression of interest. And so looking forward to some of the additions that we'll see on the IMSA grid in 2025. Here are the championship contenders. I was just noticing this on the screen. iRacing by Coanda. Rexy in the rearview mirrors has got Florian Lebigra right behind. 90 points is now the championship swing. And what did I say in terms of my math? It was 100 points, Joey, after qualifying that split these two teams. Effectively, I think it was 6th or better, and the 171 will get it done.
Florian Lebigra has done some heavy lifting over here to vault that Team Redline car all the way up into that 7th place position, directly behind, like you said, that championship rival. And really, as long as they kind of stay put right there, they've already done the hard work, right? Just keep yourself accident-free out there. Don't put yourself in any peculiar situations that you can get any damage, or even worse, even kind of end up off track there. So definite, excellent job from that driver so far. Now it's just making it to the end.
A long way to go as well. We've seen plenty of incidents on the banking here through traffic in the past. Haven't seen too much today. Let's not forget last year we had a support race as well. The IMSA Esports Open Challenge, where GT4 cars battled here at the World Center of Racing. A little bit of aggression there shown from Rexy as the sun continues to shine into the driver's eyes in a couple of places, but doesn't quite get that move done. This is one of those things that iRacing has just continued to develop over time as well. The very first iRacing Daytona 24 took place in fixed daylight conditions. The second iRacing Daytona 24 in fixed nighttime conditions. And now we're, 10 years later, we've got the full 24-hour dynamic cycle. We've got rain added to the mix as well. The debris system updated in the last build in December has added even more impact to car contact, to the marbles and things like that. And that's really what has made the iRacing Daytona 24 and this track so cool, in my opinion, Peter, is you've almost gotten to see the development of iRacing as a platform through the course of one single race.
And I think that's why the Daytona 24-hour is the marquee event for the iRacing platform. It's the one that everyone wants to be involved with and everyone wants to win, and the participation is just off the scale. But I think it also comes down to the cars that are scanned in such fine detail, both in the GTD category, where nearly every car that's eligible for that category is available to drive on the iRacing platform, and likewise in GTP that is as well. Of course, we've got a new GTP car coming in the heart of racing, Aston Martin Valkyrie, which has been testing at Daytona. It's not going to be at the Rolex 24, certainly not racing anyway. We hope to see it at Sebring, and maybe, hopefully, we'll see it in the virtual form in the not too distant future.
And for those that don't know a little bit about Heart of Racing, part of the ownership of that team, Gabe Newell at Steam, So there's a little bit of a gaming background to the Aston Martin as well. That's just going to be cool to see. Always a great program as well, and they've got a really cool race car that hopefully by Sebring will be a part of the grid, at least for the endurance races for the rest of the year. I mean, does not mean that the entry list for the upcoming Rolex 24 is shy of talent, shy of great cars as well, as ever. An overprescribed entry list, and the team at IMSA having to of course, make decisions around the 60 or so teams that will compete for 24 hours of racing. And of course, for the chance to stand on that podium and to celebrate as a winner of this great race. And let's not forget, grab the Rolex as well. That's probably the most... I don't know what it is, Joe. Maybe that's my perspective as an outsider, but that's got to be one of the coolest trophies in all of motorsport.
Absolutely, right? You get to wear it around wherever you want to, kind of show it off, and then they're like, no way, that's a real one. Yeah, it's a real Daytona, and you went out there and earned it. It is super cool, but the action on track right now, I think, has been very impressive to me. Now, we've seen this GT field really stay bunched up throughout all of the 3 races that we've had so far in this championship, but just the nature of Daytona being the draft track, I mean, I'm looking our entire top 12 in this GT category. There's only maybe 2 or 3 car lengths apiece separating each of these cars. The Door Esports car has done a tremendous job to manage the race from the front so far. You gotta wonder if these Corvettes maybe got together beforehand and said, hey, you know what, we want to keep them up front right now because there hasn't been too much challenge for the lead up there. However, it is just a one long train. 12 GT cars, nearly every manufacturer included in it.
And well, you want to learn more about this championship. It's been a wild ride over our 4 races, and we'll be off for a bit of an off season, but iRacing.com/IMSA-esports, so you can see where we've been and maybe some more information about where we're going to come in the future. On board with Beckham Jasir and the Mercedes-AMG Williams Esports car. This is a team that started down in 10th position, but up 6 spots, up to 4th position. And Beckham, one of those drivers that slowly but surely has been just getting more and more confident. Always had the talent. Williams has been bringing that to the forefront, and now showcasing that at the top level. That's the traffic slide past. That's your race leader in the BMW M Team Redline entry. But Beckham's going to be competing in this year's Porsche Esports Super Cup. We'll be excited to see how he gets on at the very top level. In terms of BOP as well, the manufacturers in the GTD class, Corvette 1 and 2, Mercedes sat behind, and you got a Lamborghini, Porsche, Ferrari. It's quite mixed up towards the front, which is kind of what you want to see, but it's going to be more telling by the time we get to the end of the race, because right now we're still not sure how much fuel they're all saving, and so only 10 minutes away from the pit stop cycle here, guys. Going to be very curious who's first down to the lane.
It's way too early to tell who's really got that ultimate pace. The Corvettes appear to be strong, but right now they're all staying in that bunch and trying to fuel save as much. And it might not necessarily be about who's got that ultimate absolute lap speed. It's a bit of a disagreement there as the BS competition prototype, the GTP car, gets into the back of the Apex Mercedes GTD machine, and Rexy's had some contact as well, right there sandwiched in between the PGZ Porsche and the Virtual Course Ferrari as GTP, the CrowdStrike Acura, is trying to make through. We're hearing it was the 95 car that got into the 118 Rexy AO Racing Porsche.
Well, it's dropped back Tristan Iglesias slightly. He's just on the edge of the top 10, and he's got to keep a close eye on the mirrors, the Grit and Go Ferrari. Watch it. Keep an eye on the bottom of your screen. Casey Kerwin comes in like a wrecking ball down at turn number 1, and well, fortunately, not pushed off all the way. You're going to have to hope, if you are in the AO Racing by Coanda camp, there's no lasting damage to the left rear of that car, although hard to tell from this angle. I'm wondering if there is just a little bit there.
It's also a tough one because if I put myself in Casey Kerwin's shoes, you know, the prototype got the car stopped all the way at Apex. It's not like he drifted up into the racing line. It's just that there was 12 GT cars lined up like a parking lot there. And at what point do you go? So this is the replay from the 171 car. Watch the left side of the screen on the bottom here. This prototype appears out of nowhere, just barely makes a little bit of contact with that Porsche. But that's my point over here, Arjuna. It's not like the prototype drove into the middle of the racetrack. He did what he could to keep it as narrow as possible.
It's what makes traffic management so difficult at speeds as high as this. A great way to describe mixed martial arts in the past has been its high-level problem solving with dire physical consequences. Similar sort of thing can be discussed when it comes to racing, and you don't have as much help in the real world as sometimes you do in the sim. The spotters, the extra relative boxes to give you a sense for how many cars that you've got to keep an eye on. All those little things that come into play. The benefit here of being at Daytona, though, Joey, I guess, is in the real world as well, you've got the ability to get some spotters around the track, and I know the spotter stand at Daytona at the top of the grandstand building's got a pretty good view.
It does have a great view. I've been up there a couple times during the 24-hour, and yeah, this is pretty much exactly what you see. It's actually just a touch higher up, and at Daytona, it's one of the things that you only need one spotter. You don't need more than one spotter around this place, because on top of the roof up there, not only is it flipping cold in the middle of the night, but you can see everything.
Yeah, that was a surprise last year, how cold Daytona was. I was, as many people may have heard, last week at Sebring as well for our virtual race, which was cool for me to see what a legendary racetrack it is. But wow, it was cold. There were a couple of days we're out there filming for some Racing Prodigy stuff that's going to be coming out in February, and I'm a little baby. I needed all the coats that they could provide to me. 5 minutes away from 1 hour being complete, and we have a taker to pit lane. The 171 blinks. It was what I was wondering. Hard charging for the points leaders. Was that going to mean slightly compromise on strategy? It's not going to make a big difference overall. Might be doing a driver change as well, though, as off to the box they go, Peter.
A very, very busy pit road at the moment. As many GTD drivers coming in, a lot of them coming from further down the field, though the leading cars carrying on in that bunch. And what was really disastrous for that AO Racing Rexy Porsche was with that contact with the prototype, the AO Porsche lost the train. This is the express train that you want a ticket for, led by these two Corvettes up the front, the Apex Mercedes in there as well, the Williams Mercedes and the Drago Lamborghini. The AO Racing Porsche's kind of been cut adrift of this leading group, and that is not good at all. So for AO Racing, they're now on the back foot in fighting for this championship.
And I think what's kind of most interesting here about this GT stop, because we got that Team Redline car that already hit pit lane, and I do think that it was just fuel burn, because I look at everybody else and they're able to make it over here. I don't think they're trying to undercut. Lap time, our last lap time out of our leader of 44.0, his fastest of 43.8. So it's not like these Corvettes up at the front are going slow and fuel saving. I don't think it's an undercut, Arjuna. I do think it's just the fuel burn.
And well, that Ferrari, if I go back and take a look at some of the BOP information that was passed down, some were saying it's a bit thirsty. Finally, we'll see the pole sitters dive down to the lane, and so it's been a stellar stint from Damon Woods. Door Esports have been on top of this GTD class, but now new race leader gets a shot from behind as well, and Johan Harder's opened the door to Beckham Jasir in towards the International Horseshoe. There's only 3 though that will stay out on the track, and so now that the move has gone through, Jasir has slipped his way forward to second. Expect these 3 to stay as this is and dive down to the lane next time by.
That was, just got a little bit checked up there. The Apex Mercedes just getting into the back of that Mag Performance Corvette, and the slight loss in momentum allowed the opportunity for Beckham Jasir in that beautiful blue and white Mercedes for Williams Esports to just nip through and make a move. But really, it will be about how you get into pit lane. You've got a huge braking zone here, coming off the banking at high speed, 165, 170 miles an hour, and then onto the brakes hard all the way down to 50 miles an hour to the pit road. So getting that just right without getting a pit lane speeding penalty is crucial to gaining time or not giving away any time on the way into the pit road.
Again, remember, we are 2 minutes and 40 seconds away from about an hour being complete, and that's typically about the furthest in which you will expect a GTD car to go at any track. Daytona, by nature of how much time you spend full throttle, is one of those tracks where getting this close to an hour is sometimes impressive. Something to think about for next week's 24-hour race. 3 in unison, going to shorten the distance down to pit entry. And remember, they're going to, in some cases, probably have their box pretty close to the start of pit lane. Beckham Jasir finds his spot in between the two and then overshoots and has to back up. That's going to cost them a second or two. Might be very important in terms of staying in the draft. Here are those that have already pitted, and Door Esports back in front of the queue.
Well, one of my points is you never want to beat yourself out there. We saw that Mercedes overshoot that pit box, and it's just the little mistakes that you don't think about that can end up costing you a ton of track position out there. And quite often, they're the things that you don't practice the most. When you think about going out and practicing for Daytona, you're doing laps, you're getting the setup of the car right. You're not necessarily thinking about stopping exactly where you need to on your pit stall. That's going to change on session to session, depending on who all is in there. Don't beat yourself out there. It's an easy way to fall backwards.
And so here's the blend. It's, remember, a lot longer of a wait. A couple of years ago, Michelin brought their RFID tracking system to the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. And so as you basically get around here, there's a system that checks the tires, adds it to the system, and says whether or not you've used that set or not. That's a great strategy call, though, to go long and then actually slightly short fill and put yourself at the front of the field. So Corvette used to run 1 and 2 in GTD. Well, now it's Mercedes. Apex Racing Team from Williams, Johan Hart from Beckham Jasir, and that's exactly what strategy is all about. Race control, though. Contact. The 95, Peter, drive-through penalty, and Casey Kerwin's been dinged for what we saw with Rexy.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly aggressive move. It's one of those 50-50 moves that when you're in a prototype, you've got to make a judgment call, and it didn't quite come off. The move didn't quite come off. The Rexy Porsche for AO Racing did pick up some damage, did lose some positions. So yeah, it's always a tough call to, especially when it's multi-class for race control. It's a difficult job for them, both here in the virtual world and indeed for Bo Barfield and his hard-working team in the IMSA WeatherTech Championship. So yeah, it's you can see why a penalty has been handed out there, but you know, interesting listening to the racing driver's view of Joey's view of that. I can see his point of view as well. This fence I'm sitting on is awfully uncomfortable.
Well, we're officially 1 hour complete with the Michelin 240. 1 hour 40 left to go in the season. We'll be right back here on the IMSA Esports channels and live on the iRacing Esports Network. Don't go anywhere. Live, running to the checkered flag.
Cause you woke up in the morning with initiative to move, so I make it harder. Don't hold back. Galvanize.
Every day, Michelin innovates to move the world forward on the road and far beyond. Michelin, motion for life.
On the track, yeah, this race can be a close one. Off the track, things get even closer. Join the celebration of North America's most prestigious sports car race and get closer to the action all weekend long with free garage access. Plus non-stop entertainment, autograph sessions, and more. It's the Rolex 24 at Daytona, and it doesn't get any closer than this. Secure your infield admission today at DaytonaInternationalSpeedway.com.
Today's coverage of the Michelin 240 is brought to you by Traction, the official media partner of the IMSA Esports Global Championship. Visit traction.gg today. And by Thrustmaster. Drive into a new era of sim racing. Feel racing sensations like never before with T598 and its direct axial drive motor, the new generation of direct drive. This motor allows for perfect clear wheel rim motion with no cogging for high fidelity force feedback. Get yours at thrustmaster.com today. And by Michelin, the official tire of IMSA. Michelin is the exclusive tire provider for all classes of the WeatherTech Championship, Michelin Pilot Challenge, and VP Racing Sports Car Challenge Series. Arjuna Kankipati alongside with Peter Mackay and Joey Atterbury for one final time this season. Champions to be decided, and what championship swings that in the first hour have really played themselves out. In the GTP class, BMW M Team Redline have taken control, while in the GTD class, Redline are still in control, although AO Racing by Kawanda are pushing as hard as they can. An hour and 35 minutes to go, at least one more pit stop for each of the classes. And Peter, it's the GTD class where it's still all to play for.
It is. It's very difficult to tell who's got what in the GTD class. There's a large cast of characters at the front of the field between the AMG Mercedes from Apex Racing Team, Williams Esports with their Mercedes, the Corvette of Dur Esports, the Drago Lamborghinis, and where does Rexy fit in the 118 Porsche with the new gold tooth after winning last time out in Sebring? It really is very much an unknown quantity for the GTD category. In GTP, I have to be honest, I mean, I looked at it after 20 minutes and we had the leader 7 seconds up the road. I did not expect it to be like that one bit. It's now 9.6 seconds between the GTP leader and second. I have to say, I wouldn't have predicted that.
Listen in a little bit. Back onto the banking for one of our prototypes being hunted down. I think this is the view from Race Clutch and Jari Lehtinen with Mitchell de Jong on the prowl behind. We are though in golden hour. The sun's rising, temperatures are low, and most importantly, I would say, we haven't just been through a good 14 odd hours of racing, and so all these drivers are still relatively fresh. You've got these ideal conditions to go fast, and now we're seeing some pretty quick lap times in some places. Are also seeing a bit of the traffic starting to intervene. There are your race leaders though. Chris Lullum still behind the wheel, waiting for Diogo Pinto to take over. Joey, they've had a very, very solid race so far.
They have. They've been in control ever since, call it the exit of turn number 1 out here at Daytona. Then the second place car, driven by Dominic Hoffman here. That's the number 89 BMW M Team BS competition. Remember, they had to work their way up through the field after having a little bit of an early slowdown. And then the third place car here in the prototypes, of course, is Sean Campbell in that Race Clutch black car. That's the number 23. About 8.5 seconds separating first and second, and then about 4.5 seconds separating second and third as we jump over to our GT leaders here. The number 198, actually both of these Mercedes kind of interest me right now. Johan Hart is currently leading the way with Beckham Jasir in the other Mercedes, and then a more 105 sitting there in second place. But what interests me about both of them is they took about 4 seconds less fuel than that Door Esports 120 Chevrolet Corvette that is sitting in the third place position. So slightly different pit stop strategy when it comes to the fuel load in the top 3.
And again, remember, going an extra lap as well in the case of the Mercedes. They put themselves in a quite interesting position when it comes to the strategy. This is a view of the cars rolling onto the banking. I say rolling on because it feels like if you go and stand at the top of the banking that you're going to roll down if you don't hold yourself up against the walls up there. It's pretty steep, pretty significant, even when you come over here to the start-finish line. Not insignificant as you unload out in towards turn number 1. Remember, we're continuing to see, well, A, traffic splitting everything, but B, the weather and the sunrise continuing to play itself out. No rain for these drivers to be factoring in, Peter, but the conditions going to start to warm up in the next 90 minutes as we reach the checkered flag on the season.
That they are, yeah. So the track will evolve over the next 90 minutes. It was in pretty much perfect conditions up to now. The drivers will be reveling in it, getting the very most out of those Michelin tyres, whether that be in GTD or GTP. Great view there to just what the GTPs have to do to get through the big trains of GTD cars. Asking for that power there, the brake clutch Cadillac, and just see the rear just wiggling it around. Those are rear-wheel drive only, unlike the LMH Le Mans hypercars, which run four-wheel drive in some cases. You've got the rear-wheel drive only, 670 horsepower going through those rear wheels, 70 of which is from that electric motor, which basically fills the gap between basically the turbo lag, effectively, of or the lag in the internal combustion engine. Those gaps are filled with the electric motor.
Now, what piques my interest, remember I had said those Mercedes were 4 seconds shy on fuel compared to that Corvette. Well, the Drago racing cars, they're both Lamborghinis, but they've actually split the strategy. 37 seconds of fuel on the number 168, the primarily red Lamborghini directly in front of us as we ride on board the 169, which took 40 seconds of fuel. So a good 3.5, 4 seconds of fuel difference between the two team cars. Very similar to what they ran at Sebring.
Well, with the sun continuing to rise, let's spool back time to when it was slightly darker and figure out what we've seen in totality over the last hour and a bit. Hour 1 highlights coming to you here from the Michelin 240, the final round of this IMSA Esports Global Championship. And it was a glorious sight. Yes, the Ferris wheel, sunrise in the background, clean start for the GTDs, a little bit more chaos in the GTP class, where Williams Esports Chill Blast pole sitters watched at the inside. Verstappen.com made the attempted move, did not make it work though, and a bit of contact, a bit of damage on either side. From there, we settled into the rhythm though, with BMW M Team Redline leading in the GTPs, with the Door Esports Corvette leading in the GTDs, all just building through traffic passes, focusing on strategy, and in many cases, biding their time. One team that was not being patient though, the 171 Team Redline car, trying to work its way to the front and be part of all of this action between the likes of Mag Performance and the Mercedes AMG Williams Esports team. They've climbed their way up into the top 10, have the championship leaders, and all as we get our way into this sunrise conditions. Track temperature slowly rising, intensity rising for the drivers as well. And while we have seen our fair share of attrition, most of it has been relatively safe. Channel 199 Sim Racing dinged for that contact with Rexy that put the 171 up in through the field. One of our talking points through the course of the opening 70 minutes. Still got 90 minutes or so left to go. Arjuna Kankipati, Joey Atterbury and Peter Mackay here in the broadcast booth. And what a glorious shot of Daytona. I mean, I've got to say, it doesn't necessarily compare to the view from the spotter's stand, but Peter, this is a pretty impressive view. Let's go ahead and take a look at iRacing Full Throttle. Well, it sounds great, does plenty of these cars, and we're just working through turn 6 as mentioned. There's a grandstand there if you want to hear what some of these cars sound like on the downshifts. Rolex 24 in a couple of weeks time. It's a great place to go and park up. That is the Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team. Unfortunately, did not really get a chance to see Ollie Steinbrat and Lorenzo Manfredoni show their speed today. Next week's iRacing Daytona 24, hoping to see a bit more from them. Front of the field, GTDs, Peter. It's Mercedes AMG Williams Esports. It's Beckham Jasir that's made the move on Johan Harth and now leading from the front.
Well, in a strange way, these Mercedes AMG GT3s, they've almost got to work together, don't they? Because they've gone for that same strategy of short filling and to get that little bit of track position. But they need to be able to do that. They need to be able to slipstream with one another. They need to work together. They're kind of in the same, they've made the same strategical bed. They may as well line it together.
You can see the replay, how the move unfolded. Maybe there's going to be a bit of back and forth here where, no, you lead for a little bit. I'll save some fuel. Now, why don't you lead for a little bit? And the back and forth, maybe in this next pit stop cycle, we'll see them potentially even come in on slightly different laps. Because, you know, Joey, I'm interested in your perspective as the racing driver in the booth here. Pit entry at Daytona, yes, it's wide and inviting, and these drivers have been told that they're allowed to be aggressive on pit lane entry as well and use a bit more of an aggressive line and cut the distance. Ooh, mistake there from Johan Harth, going to cost them some time. But would you rather pit on a different lap to the car in front of you just to give yourself a little bit more breathing room?
I think that really depends. I think that at Daytona, it doesn't matter if you're racing the oval or the road course, you always want to come out with a drafting buddy. So if you can maybe enter cleaner and not have distractions, sure, go ahead and take it. But if you can actually work together with somebody and come out at the same time as that driver that you went into pit lane with, I actually think it's beneficial. And what we saw, that number 198 of Johan Harth, you had mentioned, was a little bit wide there in that Le Mans chicane, actually got a slowdown penalty from it. So he has dropped off of that draft train 1.6 seconds behind Beckham Jasir. And I was going to make the point between those two Mercedes. Remember, they got less fuel. I'm going to beat a dead horse over here. 4 seconds less fuel than all of the other GT cars. They might have been drafting just to save some of that fuel.
Strategy always rises to the forefront in races like this. We've seen, as Peter called out at the start of the show, drag races all the way to the line. Yesterday we had the iRacing Raw on the iRacing Esports Network that had LMP3 cars, GT4s, and touring cars at play. One of the categories almost had a drag race to the line, and then one car ran out of fuel. Yes, coming towards the start-finish line on the final lap. That is cruel. Pass up the inside. Williams Esports Chill Blast are up to 11th position. Remember, if we did do the math, we think that they've got to be 7th to guarantee themselves the championship. An hour and 22 minutes to go. They maybe have been setting back and trying to do something on fuel strategy, but there's a long way to go still. They've got to find 39 points.
Well, that's what a turnaround, because the number 5 Williams Esports Chill Blast team, they've been not dominant, but they've been certainly been the strongest car, and you've got to think that they're absolutely reeling right now. And it doesn't seem to be that whatever they do, they just don't seem to be able to move forward. So it really is advantage red line right now.
Advantage red line, a drag race between two Corvettes. I know Peter Mackay loves seeing the sight of a Corvette running well around the outside for the 56 racing team as it passes the Mag Performance entry. The 151 that has had a driver change, and Federico Godoy has taken over from Andrea Bristow. Guillaume Levesque is now up into 8th position. GTP pit stops are underway, by the way. And so Dominic Hoffman brings in the number 89, the BMW M Team BS Plus competition car that's been running second for most of the day. And he's going to hand it over to his teammate, Phil Denez, to jump in.
Yeah, like you said, I think that was the 89 car on pit lane as we continue to watch this championship fight here. This is that 118 car and the 170, our top 2 in the championship, as we get some shots of what was one more of those prototypes on pit road. Now, typically what we've seen out of these fuel stints so far in this IMSA Global Championship is that they run a full fuel stint on the very, very first stint, and then they don't pack the car 100% full of fuel. Going to have to basically take our notes and see what the rest of that strategy is going to be.
A lot of these big teams will have engineers behind the scenes working on fuel numbers, and it's pretty simple in many cases, just a spreadsheet which they're keeping up to date with fuel numbers and making sure it matches up to the expectation. Race leader is going to come in though with an hour and 20 minutes to go. It's Silly Lully. He's done half this race, and has he just been dinged for speeding on pit entry? Chris Lullum has made a mistake that's going to cost them the race lead, and will it cost them the championship as well? One small mistake and big implications.
That's huge. That's absolutely huge. BMW M Team Redline, they really had it in their hands in that number 20 car, and well, it's all gone wrong with a mistake going into pit lane, speeding on pit lane. Can you believe it?
The margins are fine. Pit lane limit here is around 100 or so kilometers an hour, and I'm not quite sure how close it was for Redline, but this will end up costing them about 30 or 40 seconds extra on pit lane. We will figure out what this means in terms of the point situation once the strategy cycles on through. Still waiting for CrowdStrike, Kawanda, Williams Esports Racing Prodigy at the front of the field, still to come down on towards the pit lane. So back over to the GTDs in the interim, because the championship leaders here, once again, nose to tail. Rexy in front of Team Redline's 171. And go back to what we said at the start of the show. Redline just needs 6. That spot's in front of them. Bottom of the screen, Joey. It looks so innocent until you see the lockup.
Yeah, and it looked innocent because he didn't lock it up until he was on pit road. But let me tell you, he blew through that pit lane speed limiter and then pretty much came to a stop on pit lane. So it looked innocent, Arjuna, but it was far from, unfortunately.
Some would class that as karma. 40 seconds confirmed extra in pit lane for BMW M Team Redline. We still don't have final confirmation of what the points would look like. Remember, we still have a good 9 or so cars to dive into pit lane. Williams Esports Chill Blast are out of position. They still need to come down towards the box, but you can see exactly what it does with Redline no longer in the lead. If anything, they're now starting to look a little bit more at Solpec Precision Racing, although I think that is something we'll have to recalculate in about 5 laps time. Even the best make mistakes, guys. I guess that's what we've taken from that incident.
I don't think Joey Atterbury's ever done that, though.
Never. But Peter, it goes back to what we talked about. Remember when we saw that Mercedes overshoot that pit box? And that was a small mistake. But when you overshoot the pit lane speed limiter, that's a completely different ball game. You've now opened yourself up to the penalties out there on the racetrack. So you never want to beat yourself. And unfortunately, Team Redline did it a lot.
We'll see again what it means. The best point of comparison, I guess, here is now the gap between Redline and BS Competition, who I think now technically will be the net race leaders, with Phil Denez behind the wheel. Add the 2, carry the 1, XYZ. You could tell I'm not great at doing math on the fly here. I think it's about 25 seconds off the race lead for BMW M Team Redline. That will drop them almost assuredly out of the top 5. Here come Channel 199 Sim Racing. This is a scheduled pit stop. Remember, they had a drive-through penalty to serve a couple of laps ago.
It's been a story of up and downs, really, hasn't it, for Channel 199 Sim Racing? But here is your, well, I guess maybe now back to being championship leader again at number 5, Williams Esports Chill Blast into pit lane, new Michelin tyres and a slurp of VP Racing fuel.
I love that slurp of VP Racing fuel. Here comes Max Verstappen, by the way, into pit lane. He's going to get out and hand over to Gustavo Ariel, you would assume, and expect Max Verstappen to be joining the broadcast in the next handful of minutes, and for him to catch up with either Peter Mackay or Joey Atterbury. Should be an interesting and illuminating conversation, to say the very least. One thing that, Peter, you are going to have to deal with this year in the broadcast booth as part of the IMSA radio team, this concept of energy that has come to the GTP cars in the last couple of years. Well, now Energy is what we're going to talk about in GTD cars as well. They've all been fitted with new torque sensors. We're not talking so much about fuel flow anymore. So I wish you the best of luck in understanding all of that, because you've got to explain it to us in 2 weeks' time. And yes, there will be a quiz. More cars down onto pit lane. CrowdStrike and Williams Esports Racing Prodigy. Joey, it means just 2 left out there on track to come down to the lane. Grid and Go and Solpec Precision Racing.
Yeah, it's trying to stretch that fuel as far as they can possibly take it as we watch these GT cars exit that Le Mans chicane. It's always the guessing game. Like I said, they always fill it up to start the race, right? And then on fuel stop number 1 and fuel stop number 2, it's up to the team's discretion. How much has the driver saved out there? How much can they afford to fuel burn? And ultimately, how much fuel do you actually want to put in the car? Because remember, the longer time that you're stopped stationary on pit road, the other cars are going to get by you. And look at this. There goes Team Redline by Rexy. That is a change for position. Rexy actually down 2 spots there, losing those valuable points.
Guillaume Levesque slides his way on through, and just for the record, I forgot to unmute myself for a second there. So it does happen to all 3 of us in the broadcast booth. Tell you what, we will head down to pit lane in a few moments' time. Peter Mackay's got Max Verstappen standing by.
Max, thanks for coming to join us after your stint there. We have to talk about the opening corner. Just give us your account of what happened there.
Yeah, I just locked up a bit, and yeah, I locked the rears. You know, this car, it's very hard to control that, so it just went wide. And of course, there was also then the other car that I couldn't avoid. So that was a bit, yeah, unlucky there, my mistake. And yeah, after that, I think both of the cars had damage, so it was quite a difficult first stint with that damage everywhere. And then yeah, we boxed, almost cleaned the car. I would say it was almost fully repaired, so the pace was almost back. And then I tried to pass a back marker, I think a GT3 car, and he didn't keep his line, so he just moved. I think he just wanted to move out of the way, to be honest. And bit of miscommunications, and I had damage again within like 3 laps of that stint. So I wouldn't say it was particularly great.
This is not our way to welcome you to the IMSA Global Esports Championship, Max, that's for sure. Where do you think the target is now, given the incidents that happened? What's the target now?
I mean, I don't know. Honestly, we are quite far down. So, I mean, if we can get maybe a top 10, P11, something like that, I think that's the only thing that we can do, because yeah, we lost so much with, of course, the drive-through, then the damage, of course, the whole stint, this stint again. Honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it also doesn't really matter once you had such a terrible start to to the race. You know, we're not here for P10, but we'll try to learn a bit for next week, even though this is probably not the car that we will run. You know, I always try to learn a bit for next week.
You know, Max, you had the chance to drive the Acura AROX over the winter. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how it compares to iRacing, especially as you prepare for the 24 Hours of Daytona on iRacing next week.
Yeah, it gives you a good idea. You know, the real car is a lot of fun to drive. On iRacing, the Acura is very fast as well. So yeah, I think it did prepare me a bit, you know, before you jump into the real car, to know how a GTP car drives in general. So for sure, yeah, it helped me a bit to get a bit more comfortable out there. And yeah, iRacing does a good job of that. Of course, we know that probably the car at the moment is a bit too quick at a high speed, but I think in 1 or 2 patches that will be fixed as well. But it's a great car to race with.
Hey Max, Joey Atterbury here. I just got to ask you about the traffic management, because you're kind of all by yourself out there. 50 cars out here at Daytona. What's it like? You obviously have a ton of experience sim racing and multi-class, but it seems pretty busy out there.
Yeah, it's quite hectic. I mean, there are a lot of GT3 cars as well. Some are still bunched up. So, you know, you have to either commit left or right. Sometimes you have to go with one, you have to go on the left and the other one on the right. But it's fun. I enjoy it. Of course, sometimes it works out a bit better than other times that you get it right. Sometimes you lose time, sometimes you gain on your competitors, but I think over the course of the race normally it pretty much evens out. But it's good fun. I enjoy that.
And Max, let's talk one more question for you. Let's talk about GTD. You won the iRacing 24 Hours of Daytona last year in the GTD class. Your teammates at the Team Redline 171, they're embroiled in a championship fight. What's it like from their perspective as the slower class? Because you've got experience now as both being the terrorizers in the faster class and the victims in the slower class.
Yeah, I mean, up until I've never really raced in GTP as well, so this was my first proper race in it. It is very different. Yeah, normally I'll always be racing the GT3 cars, and yeah, you have to pay a lot of attention because these GTP cars have a lot of downforce. They can carry tighter lines in certain places for sure, and of course they can also brake a lot later. So you have to always keep your eyes open, look in the mirror, because once they commit, you have to open the door for them.
Well, Max, thanks for taking the time to come and talk to us, but also to race with us, and best of luck for the year ahead, and maybe a 5th F1 World Championship lies for you in 2025.
Thank you, guys.
So a quick catch up there with the Verstappen.com Acura and with Max Verstappen. He says top 10 is now the target, and he'll be watching on the 171, who we're watching right now. You saw the live points as well. It is advantage red line. 6th is good enough for them to win this championship. But Peter, they're very much concerned, I think, about the rearview mirror. We know the Corvettes have got some speed, and Guillaume Levesque in that 56 Racing Team car looking very, very hungry right now, as much as Rexy sat behind as well.
Well, the Corvettes have got a lot of speed, for sure. They're definitely a threat, but also the efficiency of the Porsche is something that they've got to worry about too, because you just don't know what Rexy's got up the sleeve in terms of fuel strategy. So the job's not done quite yet for Team Redline, and well, it's been a pretty shaky day overall, having been in a great position in GTP and now not being in such a great position. They really want to get that GTD championship.
Just got word, another penalty from race control. This one to the Simufy number 14, the Acura. So a drive-through penalty for them. That's just been served as well. You can see the GTPs all on the outside. We'll always see the sports cars, the GTDs, take the shortest distance that they can, which means as low on the banking as possible, and requiring the prototypes to navigate the longer distance and use their slightly higher speed to their advantage. Roll that momentum through that chicane, and a chicane that I think, Joey, it's going to be very interesting this year, how the Le Mans chicane, how the bus stop chicane, however you want to call it, how it looks like from that risk-reward strategy, because gone is a lot of that grass. And why is that important? Because as the grass ruts out over a 24-hour race, the more risk you take by running over it, the more risk you take on your car as well.
100%. And I will say that the crews at Daytona have done a tremendous job to deter the drivers from using that grass by adding in various curbs over the year. But ultimately, once we had that huge wreck at Daytona with the NASCAR cars just going end over end, there needed to be something done about the safety aspect. Just Chill Blast, that was almost 3 wide there going through the kink in the infield. This number 5 championship leader car still fighting for that championship, remember, because that number 20 car finally had that penalty, that drive-through penalty in the number 5. You can see the points on the right side of the screen. They are back firmly in the lead by 50 points. So the prototype stuff still up for grabs, but those mistakes on pit lane has cost them, and that's where that change has come from.
So I'm trying to do the math right now, which again, always dangerous as a commentator. But I think if you're Williams Esports Chill Blast, there's only 2 cars behind you still left on the same lap. So at most, you're going to drop 20 more points. You can be conservative and drop 20 more points. BMW M Team BS Plus competition, they cannot get any more points. So at most, they will be 30 points behind, as confirmation of that drive-through penalty mentioned for Simufy's number 14. The question is really going to be for BMW M Team Redline. They're 32 seconds off the race lead right now, Peter. But I think they're really going to be looking from here. How can they get 90 more points? Well, they'd have to get up to 3rd. That's probably a little bit unrealistic. But 6th or 7th, put the pressure onto the other Williams Esports car. That's what they're going to be trying to do.
I think all they can do is put the pressure on. It's just trying. They had amazing speed in that first stint, didn't they? I mean, Chris Lullam was just tearing off into the distance. So they've got speed for sure, and they'll also be. I think they'll be encouraged by the pace of the 89 BMW on screen right now, because the BMW's been a strong car from the beginning to now in this championship. So they're not done yet. This is far from over, this 2024-25 IMSA Global Esports Championship.
And remember, BS Plus competition tangled up at the start of our race at Sebring, the Grid Finder 240. They entered that race second in points. If they finish better, they could have been in prime position to take advantage of this chaos. That's just how crazy GTPs are. Both in the real world, remember in 2024, how many different teams still had a chance at the championship going into Petit Le Mans? It's pretty crazy in the virtual world as well. Phil Denez, someone who raced a couple of different GT3 cars in Europe in 2024, both the Lamborghini Huracan and the BMW M4 GT3. He's traded them in for the keys to the BMW M Team BS Plus competition prototype, and it's partnered up with brand new member to the team, Dominic Hoffman, someone that joined Drago Racing in 2024, who we quite conveniently cut over to now, sitting fourth in the GTD class. But Hoffman making his debut, one of the very best in these prototypes, and might be starting off with a victory as well. Fight for third, where our attention shifts to now, Joey, where our pole sitter, Damon Wood, under pressure from teammates behind.
Yeah, that's that white and black Corvette of the Door Esports, Damon Woods. And like you said, both the Drago Racing Lamborghinis directly behind. Our two Mercedes have kind of scampered off up the road by about 4.5 seconds. So this fight for kind of the last podium fight is definitely quite close. And I had mentioned that those Mercedes were on a different fuel strategy. Well, they're still on that different fuel strategy. I think the only thing that really makes sense to me is this number 120 car. They've stayed pretty consistent on how much fuel they've been putting in the car. The two leaders, it's just a question mark for me right now. Can they keep the 4.5 second gap up there while still maintaining the same pit stop strategy and fuel amount times as these Corvette Lamborghinis are able to do? Or is there going to be that difference and close this front five back up?
Look at how crazy it is on the left side in terms of movers and shakers, but you can head on to iRacing.com/IMSA-esports to learn more about these drivers, to the series schedule itself, and how these drivers got here, because it was a public qualifier. 4 teams qualified, or rather 8 teams had the chance to qualify by winning the broadcast split of VCO Grand Slams. Everyone else, time attack qualifiers, equal chance to get into this series. And if you're just joining the iRacing platform, well, head on to iRacing.com, learn more about the world's premier motorsport simulator. 40% off new memberships. If you want to get started, every day is race day. Qualifiers will be rolling around in a handful of months' time, potentially, and you want to be in the right position at the right time. And the iRacing family just continues to get better and even bigger. If you want a little bit of off-world dirt racing, well, Exocross is available on the Xbox Store, the PlayStation Store, and via Steam. And World of Outlaws, already available on Xbox and PlayStation stores, is coming to Steam on February the 5th. You can grab the World of Outlaws Dirt Racing 24 title. Learn more at worldofoutlaws.game.com. And let's not forget the same teams powering all of that, developing behind the scenes, NASCAR 25 as well. Very excited about all the work that's being done. And let's not forget, lots of work in iRacing as well. A big build in December, new cars, new tracks, and plenty for road racing fans to enjoy. Oval racing fans have hopefully got some things to look forward to in the builds coming up, especially with the Dale Jr.'s charity race. Head on to iRacing social media to learn more about a new addition to the iRacing special event. Nearing those 60 minutes left to go, and so let's talk strategy here, guys, because GTD's not far away from thinking about diving down to pit lane for the final time today.
And I'll jump in here when we talk about strategy. Now, our first full fuel stint, GTPs, they lasted about 40 to 42 minutes. That's how far they can go on that full tank of gas. So these prototype cars have to stretch it at least another 20 minutes if they're looking at only one more stop. Now, the GTD cars, they are on a different strategy. They can make it about 55 minutes on that full tank of gas. So only about another 5 to 6 minutes out there on the racetrack. And then potentially we can see those GTD cars come in because they can make it to the end. But once again, it all comes down to each team and their strategy. How much fuel do they actually want to put in the car? Is it a full tank? Is it 80%? We're going to find out.
And strategy is one of those things that even the best sometimes falter on. We've had a couple of races It might have been now going back to 2023 in the BMW M-Sim Cup when some of these teams have short-filled because, of course, you're trying to be as aggressive in the pit stops as you can. Red line's 171, a little bit nervous there as this GTP battle rumbles through. It's Coander's 8 versus Race Clutch's 23. Jake Dennehan on defense. Young Elvis Rankin on the prowl, directly behind in the purple and orange. Still waiting, of course, to get closer to around 40 minutes to go for these GTPs to be thinking about when they'll dive down to pit lane for the final time today. Peter, I'm going to ask you a question about Daytona as someone who's now experienced it in the real world a couple of times. Close call there out of turn 6. Is there ever a time when you don't get scared watching some of the slicing and dicing through traffic that these drivers do?
Well, I certainly do. I don't know if the drivers will. They just must be so focused and involved in it. But it is always a real joy to watch. And because in the Rolex 24 at Daytona, we've got over 60 cars, and often the field will be reset with a full course caution, and it's all back together again. So on that first pass through, when the prototypes come round to lap the GT cars again, it gets seriously frantic. So yes, it is always a bit of a heart raiser.
Here's a look at the replay down to 1. Channel 199, Sim Racing aggressive. Remember, they've had a race where they've shown speed but been pegged back on occasion. BMW M Team Redline directly behind former race leaders and in their championship fight. Lunge up the inside of Doors Mustang, and it's Grid and Go that get the worst of it, but heads up there from Pinto to avoid being caught up in more.
That was a little bit of a moment down there at that first horseshoe, wasn't it? We've seen that number 95 car kind of be aggressive on the brakes. First it was Casey Kerwin getting into Rexy there at turn number 1, and then ultimately his teammate getting into another car there at that first hairpin. So you got to be strong on the brakes here, and I understand the mindset, right? You kind of put yourself down deep in that hole, and you got to dig it out of it somehow. We're going to get another look at it. So watch the bottom of the screen here. The number 95 is a car directly in front. Does he lock up? Oh, he's getting pinched down from the other GT car. We did not see that from the other camera angle. That was 3 cars all going for 1 spot.
Interesting little sequence. Meanwhile, in the live pictures, a swap up towards the Le Mans chicane as Jake Dennehan gets in front of Marcus Hamilton, Elvis Rankin, Robin Glerum. There's now 4 in this fight for 2 steps on the podium spots. This might actually be somewhat what BMW M Team Redline want to see, because rough math, they need to get up to at least 4th to still have a chance at the championship, and they're around 20 plus seconds off of this fight. Now around the outside, that Acura is struggling in a straight line, maybe with its top end deficit with the shorter gear stack. Has a lunge up the inside as well from Robin Glerum. He didn't want to wait behind Elvis Rankin. We're getting into the business end of things. 1 hour to go in the season, 1 hour left in the Michelin 240. Rankin still on the inside through the horseshoe, and he's going to force the BMW out wide and hold on to the spot.
Great stuff, and this is the Daytona battle that we came for. 57 minutes to go, and this is going to roar on all the way to the flag. And I tell you what, Elvis Rankin there in the Porsche got a great draft on that Acura. I do wonder actually if the number 3 got a slowed down penalty coming out of the Le Mans chicane, because they seem to lose a lot of time.
It's an interesting one because it didn't look like they were necessarily that slow off the chicane, but you're right. I mean, now they're continuing to lose a little bit of ground as we pick them back up as they work through NASCAR's 1 and 2. So down the back straightaway in towards the chicane once more they will go. It's the 67th lap of this race, if you're curious. Down through the chicane, getting word that there may have been a little bit of contact with that CrowdStrike Racing entry. That might now be quite significantly impacting them. I'm just looking at the top end speed for Sam Michaels on my timing screen, and it does seem to be quite significantly down from, or rather Marcus Hamilton, I should say, significantly down on those in front of him.
I'm just impressed with these front 3 prototypes that are running 2nd, 3rd, and 4th right now. I'm looking at my timing and scoring, and I see plus 13 positions gained for our 2nd place runner. That's the number 23, driven by Jake Dennehan. Plus 7 positions gained for Elvis Rankin in this white, orange, and purple car as we see, that was Glerum trying to get up the inside. Almost a deja vu from what we saw just 1 lap ago. Robin was extremely aggressive on those brakes, and that entry itself is up 12 positions as well. So all three of these prototypes kind of have the same mindset. They're going forward and not looking back.
Let's take a look at what happened on the bottom. That's taken a bit of damage onto the CrowdStrike car. Ooh, up the inside. Wow, that's not where damage was brought, but that contender for move of the race did not want to sit behind any sort of traffic, and through the turn one traffic jam, thank you very much, doesn't lose too much time at all.
I think the sea parted for him a little bit. Great eyes-up driving from the GTD cars there to try and make a path, because they saw this bright yellow Porsche prototype arriving on the scene at quite the rate of knots there.
The speed difference is quite significant between these two classes. Add the LMP2s into the mix like they have, of course, in the real-world IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, and it's a veritable cornucopia of fun for the drivers dealing with the traffic. So Glerum continues to go up high. If you're wondering, by the way, these drivers running a little bit wide through turn number one. That's the more natural racing line. You're going to see it plenty next week in the iRacing Daytona 24, and hopefully some sends like that as well. Williams Esports Racing prodigy up to third. They started down in 16th position, unable to qualify, and now step onto the podium.
A forceful move done on Elvis Rankin, and you saw Elvis flashing the lights at Robin as he's trying to kind of escape up the road. Let's check out the bottom half of the screen here. This is going to be that replay of that prototype sneaking through turn number one on the brakes and just barely avoids that Team Redline car. And remember, that is your championship leader in those GTD points. I'm sure that's a little bit of a nervous moment, no matter who you are behind the wheel, seeing a prototype barreling into turn one behind you.
Well, we'll see if we're going to see much more risky moves like that, and what race control might have to say about that one too, given the daring nature of it. Did note, first GTD take it to pit lane. It's BS Turner that has slid their way into the box alongside of Drago Racing's 168. Pair of driver changes going on as well. We have entered that critical window where some of these teams have been plotting. Probably another 13 minutes or so before the prototypes are in a similar sort of situation. I'm just going to throw a wild thing out there, as that is kind of what I expected, for Jake Dennehan to open the door and for Robin Glerum to say thank you very much, I'll take advantage. Not quite sure they're going to work that one out three wide on the entry to the horseshoe. Dennehan's overcooked the corner as well. He's lost himself a whole bunch of time on the marbles. Rankin's avoided piling into the back, but I was just about to say, I wonder if the 33 is a dark horse for the race victory here.
He's got the speed right now. That last lap, let's compare him. A 130.2 is more action. That was potentially three wide again there in turn number 5. Just the prototypes trying to make their way through the GT traffic as fast as possible. And here is that number 33, Robin Glerum, the biggest mover in our GTP class, up 14 positions. That's right, he started all the way back in 16th. Finds himself in second place position right now. And I was going to compare the data, right? A 130.2 from Robin last time. Our leader, Phil Dennis, a 131.4, over 1 second faster than our leader.
Just trying to figure out right now as Beckham Jasir brings in the Mercedes-AMG Williams Esports 105 from the race lead. That GTD equation, how long can some teams go? Because there are, let's not forget, a couple that did do some slightly different things in terms of strategy. And we're reaching the conclusion of all the excitement. I did just see, by the way, if you're wondering about the move from Grid and Go, Race Control saw it, did not necessarily agree with some of the other stuff that they've been doing in the race, and it wasn't a penalty, I think, for that particular thing we saw a replay of, but they do now have a drive-through penalty, Peter, for not leaving racing room for one of their competitors.
Oh dear, Race Control being pretty firm with the drivers, keeping them on a short leash, which I have to be honest, I quite like that. I like the drivers need to know where they stand, and yeah, that's strong officiating. I would say pit stop for former leader Mercedes-AMG Esports with Vasilos Belitsiotis. Car 105 has come in for its final stop.
Very quick driver is Belitsiotis. Last saw him at the season opener. Been a while since he's jumped back into the series. I think a couple of races in the DNLS and things like that. We'll see how quickly he gets up to speed. Now just waiting for Johan Harth, right on cue, to descend down on towards the pit lane. And so he'll hand over to Peter Berryman in this Apex Racing Team Mercedes. Remember, they came in a little later in the first sequence, but came in for a slightly shorter stop and put themselves up towards the front in terms of track position, leapfrogging some of those that had run very, very well. So it means now advantage in terms of track position goes back over to the 120 Door Esports machine that qualified on pole position, as Rexy in pit lane gets Tristan Iglesias out and Michael Johnny in.
Yeah, the 118 doing a driver swap. This is the 171 car on pit lane as well. They're doing their final driver swap as well. So the only cars that have really stayed out on the racetrack is probably, call it your top 10 on timing and scoring. You see a few of them in pit lane right now. But I think what I'm most curious about is the Corvette, right? The Door Esports 120, as we get the drive-through penalty from the number 6 car going down through pit lane here. Can that Corvette stretch out those 4 seconds difference of fuel that we saw between the Mercedes and them earlier? Or is it going to come out with the Mercedes out 1-2 like they went in?
We'll get a better sense once that sequence shakes out. It does look as though Berryman is about 2.5 seconds in front of Beliziotis on the merge. And that's broken the draft technically as well. So Apex, remember, letting the Williams car slide in front and being able to take advantage of the hole in the air. Slightly shorter pit stop for them, and positioned with 50 minutes left to go in a very, very important situation now. Really, the Mercedes have been on a bit of a back foot for the majority of the championship, hoping to really end off with a high. Here comes the pole sitter, though. Damon Wood's going to hand over his car, and we'll finally get a sense for what his teammate Jonas Rutin is going to be able to do.
I think I saw that Drago Racing car of Nicholas Mateo also follow him into pit lane. So the majority of the front runners in that GTD class have hit pit lane or are hitting pit lane right now, and with about 48 minutes left, they can make it all the way to the end. Did you see that aggressive entry from the 199? That Mercedes even making a pass on the McLaren, but because of it, guess what? They just got popped speeding entering pit lane.
May not be the only ones. I wonder if Maniti Racing also found themselves in the same situation. Does seem as though we've reached the limit. No one can go further than this point without a trip to pit lane once again. We'll get a sense of where the strategies have shaken up everybody else. Peter Berryman, though, is going to cycle back to the race lead in the class. This is what happened to his teammate, though. You'll see them try and be as aggressive as they can on the inside of the McLaren. A little too aggressive.
Exactly. You know, you were following a car in, and there could be a couple variables there. It could be that the Mercedes driver had a deeper brake marker just overall, and the McLaren maybe took him by surprise. But either way, the Mercedes was not able to adapt quick enough, sped across that pit lane entry line, and therefore gets that penalty.
Left side of the screen, you can see movers and shakers. Robin Glerham's just gone back up to second and past Kawanda. And that's going to mean 14 positions gained for him. Remember, a biggest mover in the GTP class. He's, in fact, the biggest mover overall as well, because no one in the GTD category has been able to match him. Championship rivals, once again, bumper to bumper. Enzo Benito in front of Michael Johnny, but as it stands right now, Joey, it's advantage to Team Redline. We knew all they had to do was finish 6th and the championship would be theirs, but they're going to do it and finish in front of AO Racing by Kawanda after what has been a very impressive day.
I know that we talk a lot about Team Redline. Remember, they've won a couple races already this championship, and they didn't necessarily have the best qualifying position here today. And I think that kind of took us all back by surprise. And all of a sudden, AO Racing had the shot at the championship, but the 171 car has been able to execute on everything today. They've put themselves in a position, and they're looking for that championship.
One final time this season, let's drink in the sights and sounds here at the World Center of Racing, presented by Thrustmaster. One final time indeed to drink in the sounds and the sights of the Daytona International Speedway and the IMSA Esports Global Championship. You're watching the Michelin 240 live on the iRacing Esports Network on IMSA TV. Championship battle still very much in the cards, albeit starting to settle down. 44 minutes left to go, and well, one championship battle somewhat settled, you'd think. The other one still very much wide open. In GTD, Drago Racing sit in front of this battle and towing them around. Team Redline and iRacing by Kawanda, and that 171 Ferrari is doing enough to hold on to the championship lead. In GTP, we'll have to find out at the very end, but BMW M Team Redline have to push as much as they can. A podium might be enough for them to get to the top of the field. We'll have to keep in mind. We're only 2 weeks away, though, from all focus being on the Daytona International Speedway, but for 24 hours of racing.
Should be pretty cool to watch here in a couple weeks around the high banks. A lot of these, what are sim liveries, but you're going to recognize them in the real world, too. You know, Turner Motorsports, one of the most prolific IMSA competitors and teams. I believe they're bringing 6 of the BMW M4s between the GT4 classes and the GT3 classes down to Daytona. And of course, that fan favorite AO Racing. We've been highlighting Rexy so often because they won our esports race just last week at Sebring. They got that gold tooth. We're going to see how many gold teeth Rexy, the real world Rexy, can collect here in the 2025 season.
Those are the dates for the race itself. I think some tickets might still be available, so head on to DaytonaInternationalSpeedway.com to try and pick up a couple of passes. The access that IMSA does grant you, unprecedented though, so very much keep that in mind. And again, you're watching some of these cars that you'll see out there in the real world as well competing. Rexy looks great with a golden tooth. That BS Turner livery actually won in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge at Sebring a couple of years ago. So there's just a handful of deliveries. You'll get the CrowdStrike Racing entries as well. We've got some GTPs in the field there. And we've got some real-world racers in the mix. Bill Denez at the front of the field, not racing in the Rolex, unfortunately, but real-world experience there. We have Elvis Rankin. We have Agustin Canapino, who has raced DPIs in the past too. So there is that CrowdStrike Racing car as it sits behind the traffic. And Peter, you'll be there at the Rolex 24. I mean, you've just seen, I'm guessing, over the last handful of years, how increasingly the lines between virtual and reality continue to get blended.
Oh, they've come so close now. I mean, so close in terms of how they work, particularly with the addition of the GTP category and those cars coming onto the iRacing platform as well. It was really, really cool to see and be able to get an idea for what these amazing prototypes feel like, and the sounds as well. The iRacing software team, they've done such an amazing job to get the sounds just right. When you're in that Acura, you hear that singing 2.4 V6 just screaming away. Sounds like an IndyCar because that engine was originally destined for IndyCar. Then there's the Cadillac with that big 5.5 V8, and it just rumbles as well, and that's been captured perfectly here in the iRacing world.
So 2 hours about to be complete, the final 40 minutes of the season left to go, and so your GTP pit window is officially now open. All the GTDs have finished up their final sequence of pit stops, so 2 Mercedes lead at the front, then a Corvette, Chevrolet, Lamborghini, another one of the Chevrolets before Ferrari, Lamborghini, and then Porsche. Meanwhile in GTP, 2 BMWs up front, and one of the Porsche 963s. The Cadillac for Race Clutch, the Acura for CrowdStrike, have all the 4 manufacturers inside of the top 5 for the time being. And again, the BOP for this race, slightly different to what the BOP will be for next week's iRacing Daytona 24. Very much centered around how these teams set their cars up, how they drive them, as we watch a couple of them drive down into pit lane, Joey.
I was just about to mention our overall leader is going to be having to hit pit lane probably this time as we get a bunch of these prototypes. The number 11 with a little bit of a lockup there. We've seen so many of these drivers get a black flag from speeding on pit entry. I think that fiercely forward car got away with it, did not go over that speed limit as he crossed that start-finish pit lane line. So these GT cars got Team Redline, Drago, and AO Racing. It seems like these 3, whether it's the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, or the Porsche, have pretty much been inseparable this whole race. And look at deep on the brakes goes Michael Janney in the Rexy machine all the way up alongside that Lamborghini door, and now finally clears the Drago racing machine.
He sheds his cool California demeanor there for that move. That was a rip-roaring move. I think somewhat indicative of the mindset here. They know they're probably not winning the championship, but what can they do? Put the pressure onto their rivals all the way to the very end and be the best Porsche in the field. The next best of the Porsches is the PGZ P1 Docs 114, which 11th on track and is going to end up finishing 5th in the championship. You can see how those points shake up right now. But GTP, your race leader in Phil Denez, a nice 27-lap stint to start off his time in the car, and now into pit lane. Fresh set of tires, a full tank of energy, and then back out. But he's got some pressure building behind from Robin Glerham, who is flying in the Williams Esports Racing Prodigy car.
And that is the battle for the race win then between the BS competition car and the Williams Esports BMW. And you think about it, the BMW has been such a strong car across all the circuits, and look how different they all are. The swooping bumps of Road Atlanta, to then the slightly more technical challenge of the Indy Road Course, the iconic Sebring, and then here on the high banks of Daytona, the BMW M Hybrid V8 really has been the standout car throughout this IMSA Esports Global Championship.
Plenty of cars to choose from as well. These teams did have to compete for the, in effect, the right to represent the manufacturer. After the qualifying process that selected the 48 teams, then they had a car shootout. The teams that had the fastest average laps in a particular car, well, the fastest 4 teams got to pick that car and use it. Saw some interesting approaches. Some teams are split in terms of their focus. For Team Redline, they were able to get 2 Ferraris. For Drago, 2 Lamborghinis. But take Dor as an example. They have 1 Corvette and 1 Ford Mustang as well. So a little bit more effort required for them to maximize the speed in both of those GTD cars. GTPs continuing to trickle down onto the lane, and this one is in from second. It's Marcus Hamilton into the box.
Yeah, it's that CrowdStrike Racing number 3 car going to trundle its way down pit lane, stop in their pit box, and get that tank of fuel and probably some tires, escape its way back out onto the racetrack. Now, what's happening directly in front of our championship contenders is a little bit interesting. I had been mentioning the first half of the race how our lead Mercedes were a little bit short on fuel. It flip-flopped during that final pit stop length as we get more of these prototypes hitting pit road. So our pole sitter, the Dor Esports number 120 Chevrolet Corvette, is actually right on the back of the number 105 Mercedes. That is going to be a podium fight towards the end of this thing.
Podium fight that I'm really looking forward to, because for many of these teams, so their first or second big race of the year, right? We had Sebring, our Grid Finder 240, 7 days ago. In 7 days, the iRacing Daytona 24, but many teams have not really done much since the holidays, and so this is really where much of their focus has probably been put towards. There's a look at the aforementioned Dor Esports Ford Mustang, which is the biggest mover of the day. They did not start at the front, and they started down in 30th position, and so slowly but surely they have fought their way forward. 13 positions gained. They would have been the biggest mover of the day in totality, except this car was leading the race. And so Robin Glerham made it 15 spots up for the Williams Esports Racing Prodigy car. But now 35 minutes to go, he makes his final trip to pit lane.
And what a performance. You just got to love it. In sports car racing, you just get these stints that stand out and stick in the memory, and that is exactly what Robin Glerham did there. Really carrying the flag for Williams Esports today with the unfortunate incidents with the number 5 car, which is hitting the pit road now, which will be its last pit stop, hopefully, of the season, and 34 minutes away from a potential championship. And this must have been a roller coaster of emotions over the last 2 hours or so. It looked like the championship was falling from their grasp, and then BMW and Team Redline speeding into the pit lane and getting a huge penalty for it. It's just flip-flop back and forth. It wouldn't be anything else other than a Daytona finale.
and it's why you never give up in all sports, but maybe most true in motorsports. Put yourself in with a chance and you might be rewarded. Let's take a look at some of the highlights from hour 2 after what was a pretty interesting opening hour. We did see plenty of action as the sun continued to rise, shining into the driver's eyes on occasion, yes, as well, but really just helping them as the temperatures rose to, in some cases, manage their fuel burnout just a little bit better. This view showed exactly what we were seeing in terms of drivers all over the track, but then down in pit lane, a unforgivable mistake in some ways you'd feel, speeding in pit lane for the BMW M Team Redline. That was Chris Lullen's last act of the season before handing over to his teammate Diogo Pinto. It's meant that the number 5, the Williams Esports Dual Blast car, has been given a chance in the championship hunt once again. And speaking of championships, in the GTD, that Redline Ferrari, that 171, is locked in a battle with iRacing by Kawanda. They're nose to tail heading into the final 30 minutes of the season. It's all been about managing and avoiding some of the risk in traffic, and so far, attrition played its part in the first hour. The second hour has been a little bit better. 1 or 2 drivers getting caught out in marbles, overcommitting in the GTP cars, but for the most part, not much to speak of in terms of retirements. Another driver finding out how inviting pit lane entry can be. The Apex Racing 199 dinged for speeding in pit lane, and a roar from Rexy to slide up the inside of Drago and make sure to stick as close as possible to their championship rivals. Arjuna Kankipati, Joey Atterbury, Peter Mackay here on the iRacing Esports Network, live on IMSA TV, and heading into the final 30 minutes of the season. This is the front fight at the front of the GTD field. Door Esports in second. They've got Mercedes-AMG Williams Esports behind them, and Peter 1.3 seconds up the road to the leaders, the 198 for Apex Racing.
So Door Esports, they're really on the charge then in that 120 Corvette. Just 1.3 seconds to find to get up to that Apex Racing Team Mercedes, and it does seem that when push comes to shove, the Corvette has got that. It's got that edge on pace, but it's got to try and bridge the gap, that 1.3 seconds, and try and not have too many incidents like that where the prototype's having to squeeze through and losing a little bit of time. So very, very tricky there as the number 5 Chill Blast BMW gets out onto the marbles, and actually, funnily enough, is right in there behind the number 20 BMW Team Redline car, so can basically follow that car home.
For a second, I thought the 5 was in the marbles and going to push wide out of that Western Horseshoe, but good job from Matt Farrow to avoid sliding off the track and into the grass. You can see the points on the right-hand side. It is 80 to the good as it sits right now. If the Williams Esports Dual Blast team finish in 10th, they will leave Daytona as champions. BMW M Team Redline need to find around 100 points, which effectively, from where they sit right now in 9th position, means they've got to fight their way forward up to 2nd in this race. They unfortunately find themselves 30 seconds off, 30 seconds to find in 31 minutes.
And I think crucially, when you saw those points, the number 89 car, which is sitting P2 in the championship, you got to remember, they're our overall leaders, so it can't get any bigger than this unless that Chill Blast car starts to fall down and drop through the order. We haven't seen them really do that at all this championship, other than lap 1 today here at Daytona, which we saw a little bit of contact, and that's the reason why they dropped down. I think that Chill Blast, keep on chugging. What does Dory say? Keep on swimming out there, and eventually you'll find a checkered flag in 30 minutes.
It's been a remarkable season as well. It's been a very short, compressed season for these drivers as well. Stuff as Grid and Go bobble over the grass there. That's an interesting line.
Sometimes you got to make room, right? The GT cars, they can't really go anywhere but maybe one car without on that fast left-hand kink in the infield, so it can be some tense moments there. Thankfully, we haven't seen any big accidents.
Just got note that maybe that little bit of consternation through the kink has done more damage than it looked like from the off-board cameras. Mechanical black flag for Jonas Rutten in the Door Esports Chevrolet, the car that put itself on pole position and has left itself with 30 minutes to go in a really nice position. They're not going to get that reward. They're going to let Williams and Drago slide forward into their podium spots. the heartbreak of motorsport, be it real or virtual.
Oh, that is absolutely gutting. I can't really see any clear damage at all on that Dura Esports Corvette. They had a race-winning car there, no doubt about it. And it's just not, like you say, Arjuna, they're not going to get the reward for that. Such a pity after a difficult season for the Corvettes, and for Dura Esports, they'll be absolutely gutted about this. Not coming in to fix the damage yet, but it doesn't have to straight away, but will need to in the next couple of laps.
They'll get 3 laps before they are forced by iRacing to return to pit lane. But yeah, you can feel the frustration, and you can sympathize with them as well. Drago Racing, AO Racing by Kawanda, they're fighting for 7th and 8th positions. Exactly what Team Redline wants to hear right now, and giving them a little bit more of a buffer back to their main championship rivals. Take a look at the replay below. Keep an eye for the Porsche missile that's going to slide up the inside in towards the kink. It looked so minor, but the damage was instant.
Yeah, and then there is maybe another piece of contact right there with that second prototype kind of squeezing through on the inside of turn number 5. And I'm with Peter on this one. I look at the car and it doesn't seem like there's a bunch of damage, but Barney is out there watching, and if he sees there's a meatball or needs a meatball out there, he is going to bring that car into pit lane. The big difference is in the real world, you'd have the team manager screaming on the radio, saying, the car's driving just fine, why can't we continue?
It's a situation that you had kind of with the Ford Mustangs last year, and the rear boot lids struggling with the negative pressure. Lead in GTP, keep your eyes on the flying Robin Glerum. Less than 2 seconds now away from the point. And last lap, 1.2 seconds gained alone. He's within striking distance. He's flown his way forward to the very front of the field. And what a story it would be from the back to the front. And I'll just bring up what I said last week. In his driver bio, Peter, Robin Glerum described himself as not very interesting. Maybe it was the least interesting person in the field, were the exact words that he used. I don't know about that. I'm quite interested right now.
I am very interested by his speed. It's amazing to watch, and at this level to be over a second quicker than anyone is a big margin. So yeah, can Robin Glerum get a win on the board for Williams Esports number 33 crew here? They've had to kind of be second best to their team car, the number 5 Chill Blast car. But wowee, if they could get a win here, and they're not far away from picking up the slipstream from Phil Dennis in the number 89 Zebra BS competition car.
Just saw Eduardo Munoz jump into the IMSA YouTube chat to say that Jaden and Matt surely have this. They're cheering on and rooting on, but this is the nervous time, 26 minutes to go. And you just sit and watch. You wait and watch. In the real world, and remember, at this point, you've been racing for 23 hours or so, and there's only 26 minutes left to run. So the nerves, the emotion, they intensify, they amplify the closer to the checkered flag that you get. And no matter whether you're fighting at the front of the field for a championship or fighting slightly further back and trying to just get a result out of this race. To the GTDs, 2.3 seconds. That's the gap between first and second, as Vasilius Belitsiotis feels the pressure from Ricardo Rico, but trying to look out of the front windshield at the Apex Mercedes up the road.
In a Mercedes versus Lamborghini here in this battle, and I want to give a little bit of credit to all of these Mercedes teams. I think that they probably felt like they were on the wrong side of the fence earlier in this season, just with the relative pace of the car at the tracks that we were racing at. But at Sebring, at Daytona, it really seems like those Mercedes have come alive out here. The BOP has reflected that, and here they are up at the front of this race. Now, I know that we had a Corvette sitting on pole here today, but I think it really has been the Mercedes that have managed the race from the front.
Qualifying is not always talked about as important in endurance races, even in a 24-hour race. I will still put to people that the higher up you start, for the most part, you keep yourself out of the danger zone, and that includes in a 24-hour race. Having said that, what was it, 2019, 2020, when the GTLM field ran over each other at the start of the Rolex 24? Mistakes happen at all forms of motorsport, and that's why qualifying is not always regarded as the most important. I tell you what, Williams Esports Chill Blast, we were wondering if they had some lasting, lingering damage after contact at turn 1 of this race, but 2 hours and 20 odd minutes later, They are right on the charge, directly behind their championship rivals. And the last thing that they need to do right now, Peter, is make a move. All they have to do, finish where they are, and the championship would be theirs as we revisit our Michelin keys to the race.
Yeah, those Michelin keys to the race have become quite important, haven't they? With the watch your closing speeds, well, that you could say that to the two prototypes that clipped the Dura Esports Corvette, which had to come in for a mechanical warning meatball flag. But the big one is remember what you're racing for. Remember what is at stake here for many of these crews to get up there to get a great finish, or indeed to be champion in this IMSA Esports Global Championship. And I'm sure the magnitude of the situation has been front of focus for the number 5 Chill Blast Williams BMW crew, because I'm sure they thought at the first corner it was all over when, you know, a fairly aggressive Max Verstappen coming through, and it was great to hear from Max earlier on. He gave a very honest account of how his view of the incident, and held his hands up to the mistake, and you've got to give credit for that. But Williams Chill Blast, it looked like it was going to slip through their fingers, but then a critical error from the number 20 Team Redline BMW put them back in the driving seat again.
And once you're given those opportunities, you can't really give them up as a move up the inside from the Grid and Go Porsche. Verstappen.com Racing, Gustavo Ariel doesn't really want to get involved in anything else, you'd assume. I did notice that he's been off the track at least once since he got into the car, so it's been a difficult day, to say the least, in that Acura after all the drama at turn number 1. And hopefully, in 20 minutes' time, we'll get a resolution as to exactly how much impact that moment had. Ride with the Lamborghini, still hunting down at Mercedes. And Joey, I mean, this is why I find Daytona so interesting, because you can look up the road through the banking and you can get a decent sense sometimes, depending on what car you're in. And I know the BMW, for example, has got a lot, it's got a really big physical rear view mirror, which blocks a lot of your perspective. But in some GT cars, you can see your target up the road, even if they're 2 or 3 seconds. The banking's one of those few times as a driver, though, that you can kind of relax and steel yourself for all the stress that you have in a race like this.
It's a time for you to take a breath, right? Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, like you said, relax a little bit. However, in a lot of the race cars nowadays, once you actually get on the banking at Daytona, because it is so steep, it is, call it, relatively sharp in terms of a corner. Remember, you can't do 200 miles an hour flat out without banking out there. You actually lose a lot of the vision, call it 200 yards up the road. So you can see a car maybe 1 or 2 seconds up from you, but anything past that, the actual roof line as well as the banking kind of cuts it all off out there. It's a little bit of an interesting viewpoint to have, and I think that this chess game that we're seeing between the 169 and the 105 is going to continue all the way to the last lap. Remember, drafting is huge here at Daytona. All of these GT cars are running nearly identical lap times up at the front of the field. You don't want to get out in front coming out of the Le Mans chicane unless you know you have the legs to make it to the start-finish line without allowing that draft behind you.
And to that point, car setup at Daytona is often very unique, because it's kind of like the 500, the Daytona 500 or the Indy 500, be that as it may, right? You're trying to take off as much a drag as you can within reasonable grounds, because obviously in the 24 you've got some corners to navigate through as well. But the faster you are in a straight line, typically you'll find some advantages. It also just helps you in traffic if you're a prototype, when you're able to pass the GTD a little bit easier. On board with the championship leader, remember, no risks. If you are Matt Farrow, you don't need to win a 3rd race this season to win the championship. You just might like to. Meanwhile, in the GTD championship battle, our 2 rivals split by the Drago racing car. And if you are Enzo Benito in that Ferrari that lead, the Team Redline entry up 10 positions so far today, Peter, you would quite like to keep the Lamborghini behind you as a bit of buffer to the Porsche.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would. And also a buffer for the fairly enthusiastic prototypes that keep coming through, just to give yourself a little bit of breathing space. And that's exactly how that's worked. And look at Enzo Benito there, just giving the prototypes plenty of room, showing what line he's going to take, making the prototypes take their route around. That's very clever stuff there from Enzo Benito for Team Redline. And for Team Redline, with 19 minutes to go, they've been really the standout crew in GT. Yes, AO Racing were very impressive in Sebring to get the win a week ago, but Team Redline, they have been an express train with that 171 Ferrari.
And maybe unfair to say this, but the 171, it wasn't the slower lineup, it was the unfavored lineup with Florian Lebiger and Enzo Benito, both very, very talented, but maybe not as well regarded as, you know, the lineup in that 170, where Luke Bennett, Gianni Vecchio were two of the drivers we've seen for the majority of the season. Here comes the move. Matt Farrow is a racing driver. He doesn't know how to sit back. He's going to be blocked off for the time being by Diogo Pinto in the BMW M Team Redline car. Remember, we do believe there's a bit of damage on the Williams Esports Chill Blast entry to the left side after a little bit of contact at turn 1 on the start. They've had a couple of trips down pit lane to get the hammer out and start to work away on getting that a little bit more repaired. And we'll see how they're able to fight with 18 minutes left to go. The fight for the lead in GTD, having to navigate through a rather interesting fight with GTPs as Grid and Go and Verstappen.com continue to squabble. But it's now 2.1 seconds between the two Mercedes, the Apex Racing car, and the Williams Esports entry.
As we ride on board here with Gustavo Ariel, looks like that car slipping out just a little bit wide there in turn number 5, that gridandgo.com car. So Gustavo's going to maybe look down to the inside here in turn number 6, but it's so important to get the run out onto the banking. And while they play the draft games, I want to put in my 2 cents about this Team Redline versus AO Racing battle that we've really seen all race long, all championship long. I know that we've been saying how great that 171 has really been racing, and things have fallen their way. It has not fallen their way in terms of the teammate cars. We finally see Gustavo Ariel make that move into the Le Mans chicane, but I also don't want to take anything away from that AO Racing car. They've had some troubles here today, right? They've had a prototype bang into the door. They've had to kind of manage some misfortunate incidents out there, but that doesn't take away anything from what that Team Redline 171 has done.
No, exactly. And Michael Johnny, I think, beat himself up a little bit for what happened at Road Atlanta. Remember, Brexy was running inside the top 5, into the chicane in the final 10-15 minutes of the race, a little bit of contact, and around he goes. I think cost them a top 10 potentially, and some decent points. That's not going to be the difference between them winning this championship and them not winning this championship. The reality is they have, for the most part, maximized the performance of that car. Back-to-back poles at Indianapolis and Sebring, finally got the win last time at the Grid Finder 240. AO Racing by Kawanda, hopefully we'll see them back a little bit more in the course of 2025. With Kawanda Esports, of course, potentially flying the flag for Rexy in some more of our iRacing special events moving forward. Gaps now hovering at just under 2 seconds. The hunt's on, and as soon as the 105 gets into the draft here, Peter, it's going to be a totally different ball game.
It is. Yeah, it is. Our Apex Racing team able to hold off the charging pair here of Williams AMG and the Drago Lamborghini. It's hard to say. It really is hard to say. Interestingly, at the front of the field in GTP, that stretched back out again. So Robin Glerham's amazing run forward has actually stretched back out. So Phil Dennis has steadied the ship for BS competition, but how do you time this run out of the Le Mans chicane? That's what it's all about. You come through this amazing sequence of corners, and then it's about timing the run from here all the way to the line and getting your draft just right.
And so this is where, remembering that these cars in the GTD category don't necessarily have too much adjustment in terms of gear ratios. They're often standard sets of stacks effectively homologated by the FIA. Now there are some Daytona specific ones, but they're not necessarily always of a benefit. You look rearwards off of Peter Berryman, who continues to lead. Nice little run through the corner. Busy day for Peter Berryman as well, as he pulls double duty in the world of iRacing. Was racing in the opening round of the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Great Britain earlier this morning. Had to make sure I got the name correct. It's Porsche Carrera Cup, not Porsche Esports Super Cup. 4th and 11th in the 2 races, so not a bad start by any means. But a slightly different car to get to grips with, Joey, right? I mean, you talk about the Porsche Cup car, no ABS, no traction control. Very different to the Mercedes that he's now driving here at Daytona.
Very, very different, but you just kind of have to take it for what it is. You have to understand the Mercedes is not going to act like that Porsche out there and separate the two. You guys can use similar cues when it comes to the driving styles, but you can't approach how you attack the track in those different cars. I do want to point something out. I think that our 105 car here in second place is going to have a really tough time hunting down our leader, that other Mercedes. Look at these lap times. Our leader, 144.05. Second place, 144.07. Third place, that Drago Lamborghini, 144.00. So if we're looking for difference in the competition, there is none inside this top 3.
I mean, we're talking about the margins, whether it's real or virtual, you know, thousandths of a second sometimes make the difference, both in qualifying and then in terms of the consistency that we see from these drivers. And I think you're right. The difference may come from one moment in traffic. Traffic gives and it takes. It's not always going to take equally. That's actually quite helpful for these two as your race leader, the number 89 piloted by Phil Denez, able to get up the inside without holding either of them up. I mean, at the front of the field, we've got 3 very experienced drivers as well. So often for people who are new to the world of iRacing, Peter, the instructions that they're kind of given about traffic management, stay on your racing line, let the faster car pass you. But once you get to this level of motorsport, once you're in the GTD class, you start to do things with the body language, the attitude of your car to indicate to prototypes when they can and when they should not attempt to make some moves.
Yeah, that's right. You're so spot on there. The body language is so important. And on that same point, for the prototypes, they've got to try and give an intent as well. They've got to present and then commit. James Weaver, who was a legend of sports car racing and had so much success in North America with Dyson Racing particularly, he was the grandmaster of that. You always knew, or the GT drivers always knew if they saw that Dyson car with James's helmet in the open top Lola or something like that, they knew that it was him. He would just be able to present. He was very decisive and was really good at getting through traffic. But yeah, it's down to actually to both classes to coexist and to give these little signals to one another.
Wheel to wheel, and the championship leaders have caught up to this battle, fiercely forward around the outside. Oh, it's a great move initially, but he overcooks the corner. The young Ruben Paulino now sees both Sam Michaels and Diogo Pinto, and now Matt Farrow cycle their way on through. What's it going to be, though, in terms of championship choices? Pinto's got to move his way forward. If anything, he's got to try and find a way to keep Williams slightly further behind. He tries to pinch the Acura as tight to the yellow line as he can as they work past some GTD machinery. Wheel to wheel, down to turn 1 with a BMW and a Porsche to navigate past as well. And Pinto's blocked off by Sam Michaels. This battle ain't done, though. 11 minutes to go.
4 prototypes lined up nose to tail, almost pushing each other through the first horseshoe right there. And yeah, just trying to run off down the road is what Sam Michaels is trying to do, because he has got Diogo Pinto all over the back end. See that BMW really close it in and stick the nose in right there at turn number 5, gets the door shut on him. But keep an eye on Diogo Pinto. He is moving forward right now. Only 10.5 minutes left in the season. I'm sure that he has forgotten everything in terms of earlier this race, early season. He only wants positions at this point.
Yeah, I think the championship in some ways is probably at the back of his mind. I'm hoping the engineers for Williams Esports, which probably include a team like Michael Preston, Jake Hammond, are just reminding Matt Farrow that you don't need to really do too much here. There's been a swap around for second, though, and I think these two making a trip effectively over to the Speedway and learning from Indianapolis and swapping back and forth and maybe trying to help each other bring that gap down. 1.8 as they unload off the banking for what is the 85th lap of the race. A little bit wide there from Ricardo Rico, opens the door behind. I think, Peter, if you're either of these drivers, you're willing to work together for the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then all friendships go out the door.
That's true. Yeah, they've got to dovetail absolutely perfectly here and give one another the perfect draft, and actually swap back and forward. If either of them have any ambition to win the race, which of course they do, that's actually what they've got to do. Strangely, they do have to work together for that amount of time, and then it's all gloves off with a couple of laps to go. But if they don't get that absolutely right, if when they're switching positions, if they slow one another up, that's just it's an ideal gift for Peter Berman in that lead Mercedes. And yeah, amazing job from Peter Berman to switch from that Porsche Cup car this morning in the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup, Great Britain, and then into the Mercedes. However, if there's 2 cars that he knows inside and out on iRacing, it's those 2 cars.
Fair comment there, because those are the 2 cars he tends to race in the most. But he's kind of like our version of Ben Keating, if you will, right? Able to jump between the categories and to do so pretty effectively as well. 1.9 still between first and second as they roll off the corner. I did just see that there's a drive-through penalty, I think, that's just been handed down for Solpec Precision Racing in the GTP class. That is for avoidable contact with Elliot Veyron, and that's going to give some free points to some of these drivers. That's right past the race leader, and Peter Berryman got scared there, that is for sure. Got extra scared by the oncoming Matt Farrow in the Williams Esports Chill Blast number 5 as well. But as Pinto and Michaels go back and forth once again, it's all past that GTD traffic with now some clean air back in front of them.
And what that has done to that GT fight up front, it was over 2 seconds between first and second between that Mercedes and Lamborghini, and now it is cut down to 1.4 seconds. This is just a shot of the number 60 Solpec car exiting pit lane after seeing that drive-through penalty with that car contact or set them back. But I think that Solpec just about that black and green entry, they got to look back on Sebring earlier this year, right? They had that podium, that 3rd place out there in the prototype class. That is something to build on next year. They're not necessarily a Team Redline. They're not necessarily a Coanda. They're still getting going with everything, and they have momentum for next year.
The gaps come down between Apex and Drago. I'm not sure if that's traffic assisted, but it's now 1.5, and Draft is going to start to play its part. A little bit of the pressure relieved from Beliziotis, the German, as they enter the chicane, clip both sides of the track. You can use some of the grass, but it's any more than that, and you start to get into off-track territory. Right, this is very much on. There is no ifs or buts about it. 6 and a bit minutes left to go. Your race leader in the BMW M Team BS Plus competition car is probably going to put one more lap on these GTD contenders before the end of the race. We'll have to keep an eye on that, though. Back over to the GTPs. Pinto up the inside. Where does Matt Farrow go in all of this as he watches from behind?
I think if you're Matt Farrow, you want to be as far away from this as possible. This is a no-win game here for him. You know, they've got enough points in the bag. I would be staying well out of the way of that, that battle, and just getting the car home. You do not want to get involved in someone else's accident. Meanwhile, battle for the podium. Elvis Rankin and Marcus Hamilton side by side, and Hamilton just a little bit later on the brakes there in that crouched-out Acura and hangs on to the position for now.
Both of the CrowdStrike machines are embroiled in fights. This one to stay in a podium position. Remember, the 3 started in second. Overall lead is also under a second. I don't even know where you look, but 2 hours, 35 minutes complete. And a blockbuster showdown to complete the IMSA Esports Global Championship in our Michelin 240. Up the inside of the GTD Ferrari for these two, not necessarily going to fight too much in the infield. Robin Glaram's been waiting, though, and been trying to keep himself in contention. That's at the front of the field. They've got plenty of a gap because these two continue to go back and forth, ding-dong battle. And don't look back, there's Race Clutch in the mix as well. 3-box view. Everywhere you look, Joey, there's action on the track.
Yeah, our overall leader in prototype escaping out of turn number 6 and onto the high banks. You've got the podium fight in GTP down on the bottom left, and then of course that Lamborghini versus Mercedes. That is your second place fight in the GTD class. I do have to say that up front in GTPs, Robin Glarham has done a terrific job. I just want to echo what you guys were talking about nearly a half hour ago. He has yet to kind of take the bit out from between the teeth. Over 6 seconds he has made up, and now it is only a 1 second gap all the way up front. And then talking about that GTD fight, watch that last lap, that run out of the Le Mans chicane. I have a feeling Mercedes might be a little sneaky on the top speed of things. It's going to go all the way down to the line.
And there were a couple of power adjustments in the BOP powered by TFR Lab, but that's all done in collaboration with some of the data from these teams, showcasing the ability of their respective cars. So the race leader is working through the international horseshoe right now. Lap times are hovering around 90 seconds or so. Make it 3 laps to go at the line. Make it 2 laps to go at the line for your GTP leader, if I've done the calculations correctly. Peter, it's now under a second. The Lamborghini's got the draft, and it's starting to charge down the Mercedes.
It is, yeah, it's game on now. As soon as it goes underneath a second, that's where you start to feel that draft kicking in, and one of the prototypes, the Porsche 963, goes by and doesn't actually slow up the GTD cars at all, so they should get a good run out of here, which they do. The Drago Lamborghini getting a fantastic run, using that mid-engine chassis to full effect, and the Mercedes, the Williams Mercedes, they're just losing a little bit of time, but will now start to just bring it back all the way along the high banks and towards the tri-oval and the ball field.
So they cross the line with just exactly 3 minutes to go, effectively, as the 105 breaks the timing beam. That is officially then 2 laps to go for the race leader. Mistake from Rico, slides wide at 1. Is this the break for Peter Berryman? He'll open up the advantage. 1.4 odd seconds as wheel to wheel through the international horseshoe. Rico doesn't want to give up track position. They've got the traffic that slides up the inside. Lamborghini holds on, but is that the battle for the lead done and dusted?
It was well managed from Rico to kind of recover from that mistake, but you're right, it was within draft range, and now it is kind of ballooned back up to 1.3 seconds as this fight between the number 3 and the number 8 car between the prototypes still continues to rage on. Remember, this is also a fight for that podium position here, so whoever leads to the start-finish line between these two prototypes does get to spray that virtual champagne.
Pretty cool podium at Daytona as well, to be a part of all that history and all of the heritage. Once again, 3 different things to keep an eye on. Race for the lead, 1.1 seconds. They are flying off to the Le Mans chicane for what will be the penultimate time. 1 final lap to go after that. And in that race for second, they're about to be passed by the GTP leaders. They've got 1 more lap to go as well. 4 races. Our 3rd year of IMSA Esports Global Championship action, and what a season it has been so far. Fight for the lead in GTD is done. Instead, it's the focus on the fight for second. 1 final lap. Can BMW M Team BS Plus competition hold on at the front of the field?
That's the question, half a second between them as the white flag is shown on this race here at Daytona, the Michelin 240, and indeed the IMSA Esports Global Championship. What a showdown it is, and how fitting to have a battle to the flag in both classes. BS competition winless on the season, and they'll be desperate to get a win on the board and get there in the mix. But it's been amazing. BMW M Hybrid V8 has been the car that has dominated this championship, but both of these drivers, these top two cars, they're both with the same equipment. Let's see who comes out on top.
Have had some of the biggest teams in the GTP class in this BMW BS Plus competition. Williams Esports and Team Redline, they've all found success over the course of the season. 1 final victory, 1 final drag race here out of the chicane. I'm trying to judge this right here, right now, Joey. I think the 89's got just enough. It will take a mighty charge from Robin Glarham through this 1 final sequence of corners.
Watch the back half of the chicane here. Does he get through cleanly? Yes, he does, but crucially, Glarum is actually closing in. It's now under 4/10 and has a top speed advantage. This can go all the way down to the line.
It's a moot point. It's just for bragging rights to close out the IMSA Esports Global Championship. But Phil Denez, alongside debutant for BS Plus competition, Dominic Hoffman, will do it. They win the Michelin 240 and put a wrapper on proceedings and show exactly what could have been if not for one bad race in Sebring. A similar story for the Mercedes Apex Racing team. Not the easiest of campaigns, but a win at Daytona to sign off in the GTD class, and by with just 1 second, Peter Berryman was pushed all the way to the very end. Meanwhile, in terms of our championship, drama all the way around. It came down to the final lap in both of our classes for our champions to have some sense of security. Turn 1 was not what they expected, but Jaden Munoz, Matt Farrow never let the head sink and crossed the line to win the IMSA Esports Global Championship in its GTB category. Redline will do the same. 1 non-podium finish in 4 races, and it was 6 that secured them the championship. Peter, 2 very worthy champions, but all of our field have shown exactly why sim racing has got so many talented drivers.
Oh, what a depth of talent. I mean, these drivers, the commitment they put into their craft is immense. And it must be difficult at times just keeping that grind going and putting in the hours that's required to compete at this level. And this is the special time of the season where that effort is rewarded for these champions. Team Redline 171 Ferrari, they've been by far the most consistent, and I think that's exactly what you could say about the champions in GTP as well. Williams Esports Chill Blast, they were the one who made the least mistakes. They were pretty much flawless all season, and they both are very much deserving champions.
Worthy winners, that is for sure. It's going to be a long off season, that's for sure, before we get to do this all again. But next week, 24 hours on the clock, and the iRacing Daytona 24. You'll catch all of that live here on the iRacing Esports Network. And I'm looking forward to diving into our post-race coverage presented by Thrustmaster. Take a look at the results, catch up with our winner, catch up with our champions as well, and sink in what has been a quite dramatic championship. Here's a look at the Michelin move of the race. Crowd strikes number 4, out of turn 6, a little bit in the marbles as they work through some of the traffic, and fiercely forward, checked up behind them. And so as we cycle our way down to the Le Mans chicane, keep an eye out for Team Redline at the back. This all in the final 10 minutes of the race, in what ended up being a fight for 7th position. Ruben Paulino would send it maybe a little bit too hard, and the cool head of Diogo Pinto saw his opportunity, never one to say no, and slides his way on through.
What an excellent move there, and you see the number 20 pick up 1 coming out of the Le Mans chicane, puts himself directly in that draft of the number 4 car, uses the power of that slipstream, pulls up along driver's right. You see one of the Ferraris going to make it 3 wide as they cross through the tri-oval, and then ultimately deep on the brakes from that number 20 car, secures him that position with a little bit of an over-under with more GT traffic coming through. Man, this prototype battle between all 4 of these cars was wild for a few laps.
It was kind of the story of the prototypes in many ways. Little small groups like this cost each other time in some cases, and really did allow breakaways through the field. Just another example of the fact that we haven't just seen moves at one corner, but all of our moves of the race across 4 rounds of this championship have been long sequences, set up in a couple of different cases over previous laps as well. Some cool heads prevailing in some cases to make some good moves. A full lap of action between those 4. Look now at the Thrustmaster post-race report as we take a look at the results presented by Michelin. It is BMW M Team BS Plus competition that grabbed the victory with Dominic Hoffman alongside of Phil Denez. Quite remarkably, their first win in the GTP class in 8 attempts in this global championship. Williams Esports Racing Prodigy make them the biggest mover in the class, 14 spots for them, and in front of CrowdStrike Racing in 3rd. They will sign off with a decent finish for Marcus Hamilton and Pablo Lazar in the number 3, with Coanda surviving Porsche 963 down in 4th with Elvis Rankin and Mitchell de Jong. Race Clutch 5th and 6th positions respectively in their Cadillacs, and in front of the BMW M Team Redline, CrowdStrike Racing Fiercely Forward and Williams Esports Chill Blast battle. 10th enough for the number 5 to be crowned our champions provisionally. Race Control, of course, still has some work to do, so these results very much still provisional in case there's more to be cycled through. Channel 199 Sim Racing in front of the Verstappen.com Michelin wildcard, with GridandGo.com Solpec Precision Racing. A couple of penalties for both of those Porsches in the closing stages. Simify, Apex and Coanda. The 99 and the 18, unfortunately, left off the leading lap. In the GTDs, it is a Mercedes-AMG Team Apex Racing team. Of course, champions of the GTD class in 2022. Only one win for them in this season, but a very important one. They'll take some solace from that. Drago Racing second, and one small mistake cost them a chance of a drag race to the line, you'd feel, with the 105 Mercedes-AMG Williams Esports team rounding out the podium spots. Corvette Mag Performance SRT, they'll be delighted with their best finish of the season in 4th, and in front of the second Drago Racing entry. Team Redline in 6th. Enough for them to grab the championship, with AO Racing by Coanda, their main title rivals, directly behind. GridandGo.com, their pair of Ferraris sandwiching the 56 Racing Corvette to bookend the top 10, about 26 seconds covering those 10 machines as well. 11th sees the first of the BMWs with the Mahler Racing team. PGZ P1 Docs dropped down to 5th in the championship, but they will be quite happy with how this season has played on out. Second PGZ car is behind them with Mag Performance SRT, BS Plus Turner, Door Esports, Valkyrie Competition, the Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team, Impulse Racing, and then the second of the Apex cars. That's your top 20. But instead of looking through the rest of the results, let's take a look at championship points. Provisionally, confirmation that it is Williams Esports Chill Blast that are your GTP champions, but Peter, maybe most intriguingly of all, it's 1 point in the fight for second.
So close there, yeah, and that win from BMW M Team BS competition, absolutely critical. And you have to spare a thought as well for BMW M Team Redline. They were taken out, of course, from the lead early on at Road Atlanta. It wasn't necessarily their fault. That was bad luck, but today, one small error with huge consequences going into pit lane as pit lane speeding penalty. They'll be sore tonight.
Not much change in terms of Redline and AO Racing by Coanda. In fact, they may leave Daytona with the same margin as they entered. Quite remarkable to say that out loud. But like I mentioned, PGZ, P1 Docs, they dropped down to 5th. And the 105 Mercedes-AMG Williams Esports team and one of the Drago Lamborghinis jumps in front of them. Remember, $25,000 to play for in the championship. Each of our champions is going to walk away with $5,000 to their respective teams for the 4 races that they participated in. We're going to dive down into, well, a whole suite of interviews in our post-race coverage. Not quite sure exactly who we're going to start with, but let's start with the Zebras. Dominic Kaufman, Phil Denaires, GTP winners, standing by with Peter Mackay.
Well. BS competition taking the win today in pretty dramatic circumstances. Phil, you were in the car on that last stint, and Robin Glerham, he was coming for you hard. Tell us all about that last stint and what was going through your mind.
Oh, well, first of all, I have to say congratulations to Williams on the title. You know, they put up a great fight all season long, and they were there every weekend, so congratulations to them. I mean, today, yeah, it was stressful. You know, they found something that we couldn't on the setup, and their pace was phenomenal and was basically just hanging on there towards the end. But, you know, Dominic did an amazing job for his debut on the team to put it where he did and keep it there in the stints. You know, it was really well executed, and I'm just relieved to get a W right at the end of the championship. And not sure where we ended in the points. I think that's still getting calculated, but either way, I feel like we did a great job this season, and a massive thank you to Danny as well for helping at the beginning and putting up all the hard work.
Well, it was a superb win and a hard-fought win too here at Daytona. It's never easy. Guys, well done on that final win, and it looks like provisionally second in the championship. Congratulations, and thanks for coming to chat to us.
Thank you, guys.
See if we can throw it down to where our GTD race winners are. Peter Berryman standing by with Joey Atterbury. We'll get his teammate Johan Hart to join us in a few moments' time as well.
Yeah, Peter, let's talk to you first here since you closed out this race for that Mercedes. How was everything out there? Once you got in the car, you already had the lead and you just pretty much had to drive out the windshield, it seemed.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it looks quite easy. Obviously, Johan does the hard job, let's say, because it's obviously he has to qualify the car up front and then secure, the positioning for the end of the race. For me, it was kind of similar to Indy Road, where it was sort of just closing it out, but I had a lot of pressure from behind. I lacked a little bit of pace for probably the first half of the stint, and then once I got settled, it wasn't so bad. A little bit of pressure towards the end there with traffic and whatnot, but I was pretty confident I was gonna close that out.
Well, Johan, let's bring you in here. It's always good to see these Mercedes get up towards the front of the field towards the end of this season here, but you didn't start up front there. You had to make that up in the strategy. Was that the game plan from the green flag?
Obviously, with the Mercedes, we know that qualifying is not our strong point, so it's always in the back of our mind to try and work some things out to get towards the front. Luckily, this round, quali went pretty well, and we started P3, so it wasn't that bad. But yeah, starting P3, it opens up quite a lot of things strategy-wise, and we tried to get to the front with the Williams guys. We tried to work together and coordinate strategy. It worked out fairly well, I'd say. It wasn't flawless because I made a mistake and lost maybe 3 or 4 seconds clearing a slowdown, but yeah, couldn't have gone any better with finishing the job.
Well, Johan, Peter, I just want to say thank you for coming out and racing with us, and congrats on closing out the season with a win today.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
And those are our race winners. Let's see if we can start to check in with our champions. Jaden Munoz, Matt Farrow celebrating here at Daytona, standing by with our own Peter Mackay.
Well, gentlemen, a huge congratulations. Provisionally, you are the champions of the IMSA Global Esports Championship. But, Jaden, I want to talk about the first corner, first lap. Just give us an impression what was going through the mind at that time.
Yeah, it was something to expect, but I didn't expect that. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what happened that lap on turn 1, sorry. But yeah, we came back anyway and still won the championship. That's all that matters to me. And yeah, I want to thank everyone in the team, Matt, Mike, all of our teammates, all the managers for this amazing result.
And Matt, tell us how much of a relief this is for you. I mean, this has been a real roller coaster of a season finale. Just tell us about your emotions right now after a pretty eventful day at Daytona.
Oh, they went from just completely on the floor to in the sky. Every emotion in that race, from disappointment to just, celebration at the end. We put so much effort into this championship, and it's amazing to have it all, pay off.
Well, you two are deserving champions. You've been so consistent all season long. Jaden Munoz, Matt Farrow, our IMSA Esports Global Champions. Thanks for coming to join us, and hopefully see you back next season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so from one team spraying the champagnes as champions, it's over to the other. It's Redline back-to-back champions in GTD, but it's the 171, Enzo Benito, Florian Lebiga are standing by with our own Joey Atterbury.
Yeah, Florian, let's start with you guys. I mean, a tremendous season, 3 times on the podium, only off the podium here today at Daytona. What does this season mean to you?
I mean, it has been an amazing season. We've worked a lot. I mean, our teammates were pretty unlucky in every races. But yeah, today we did the job. We didn't have the car we wanted. I mean, the car was pretty loose. But, I mean, yeah, we managed to save fuel on the traffic and etc. And it paid off.
Well, Enzo, let's bring you in here. What does it mean to not only become champion out here, but you guys were the car to beat. Every single week, you were always up there, top of the timesheets, leading the race at some point. What does that mean to kind of carry that flag for Team Redline, and especially even going into next year as well?
Yeah, well,
like Florian said, we did an amazing job with our training sessions, and the whole team support really showed in the end. I mean, my quali on the last round was not optimal, but overall I think we did a pretty good job. And yeah, Florian was a legend today, like he was in the other races today in particular. But yeah, I mean, we gave it all, and sometimes our car was not the strongest, but we still managed. And I think that's what Redline is about. And we're always pushing that limit, even when we don't have the right equipment. So yeah, no, overall very happy, and yeah, looking forward to the next one. I had fun. Missed some endurance races. I think they are super fun. Nothing better than this. And yeah, hopefully we can repeat it again in the future.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming out and racing with us. Go celebrate Team Redline, Enzo Benito and Florian Lebigra, your IMSA Esports Global Championship winners in the GTD class.
And always great to catch up with the drivers, get that emotion, but I'm guessing it will sink in. And there's a busy 2025 ahead. They've got a 24-hour race next week to pay some attention to as well. Let's start to wrap up, I guess, what's been a quite remarkable season. Even more cars, more teams, more viewership, more fun. I think it's been a season of more in many ways. Peter, you've just finished up a weekend of a 24-hour race and this 2-hour, 40-minute sprint. So I think you're probably ready for a little bit of a nap before you get to focus a bit more on the racing at Daytona.
Well, I was a little bit worried about that I was going to have the stamina, but the show that the drivers put on there kept me awake all the way through, no problem at all. It just held the attention all the way through. Didn't know if BS Competition were going to hang on there and were Apex going to be able to hang on, but yes, they did in both of those cases. And showing you again that the world of iRacing is, the future is bright, and the virtual world of motorsport, these top-level competitors, they just amaze me every time.
Joey, it's been great fun to have you join us for the first time in the IMSA Esports Global Championship booth. I can already say I'm looking forward to the off-season myself, but I mean, what's it been like from your perspective, seeing these drivers at this level step up to the challenge of multi-class endurance racing and trying not to put a foot wrong?
I mean, they're professional sim racers, and that's exactly what we watched for all 4 races. And I think what I liked most about it was, look at race number 4 here at Daytona. We had 2 championship favorites in each class coming into the final round. Well, guess what? They faced adversity throughout the entire race. They proved why they're champions. They dug themselves out of that hole, up to where they needed to be, and ultimately got that interview at the end of the stream here today. Rightful champions for sure.
Some will say karma, some will say endurance racing spirit. All I know is probably ended up with the right team coming out on top given the circumstances, but that's not always the case. It is motorsports. It can be cruel. Time for us to bid you farewell. Don't forget, IMSA TV, NBC, your home for IMSA competition this year. So much to look forward to as we get ready to roll out for the Rolex 24. We'll be back here on the iRacing Esports Network in 7 days' time for the iRacing Daytona 24 powered by VCO. It's a big team behind the scenes that makes this all possible. For iRacing, IMSA, VCO, and everyone that makes this possible. Joey Atterbury, Peter Mackay, joining myself, Arjuna Kankipati, and we sign off from the World Center of Racing with Williams Esports Chill Blast, with Team Redline asserting themselves as our IMSA Esports Global Champions and heading off to 2025 with a pep in their step. See you next time.